Good evening. I call the special town meeting of April 25th, 2019 to order. And I'd ask everyone to please rise. Ted Mulvihill, our veterans agent, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and in a moment of prayer and reflection. Ted.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, sir. Your hand to your heart, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You'd remain standing, and if you would keep in mind also, since we last met, some of our current and former town meeting members have passed away. John Paris, Stan Wassel, and Bob Ivets, and also Tim Frucci, our longtime wiring inspector. So if you could keep those folks and all the many people who've served our town over many years in your thoughts. Ted?
Almighty God, ruler of the universe, by your power we move and have our being. We are gathered here today to serve you and conduct the affairs of town meeting. Give us the knowledge and strength to do your will with a proper balance of values and our present needs. May we accept our responsibilities and act with courage, considering the feelings of all we work with and represent. Grant us a sense of wisdom and fairness, both now and forever. Amen.
Thank you, Ted. Please be seated. And now that you've all been seated, let me ask, are there any town meeting members who were elected or re-elected at the April 1st election who have not yet been sworn in? If so, please rise, and the clerk will administer the oath.
Do you swear that you will faithfully and impartially perform the duties incumbent on you as town meeting members to the best of your abilities according to the bylaws of the town and the statute of the Commonwealth? Congratulations.
Thank you. A couple of announcements before we get underway. We have in the town a new Director of Human Resources, Molly Keene. Is she here this evening? No? Okay. Well, we'll try again. Also, Mary Lou Folan, the town clerk, has asked me to remind everyone here and watching at home that the deadline for registering to vote for the special election on June 3rd is Tuesday, May 14th. The town clerk's office will be open till 8 p.m. that day for registration. Other days they'll be open regular hours, 8 to 4. Also, you can register online through the Secretary of the Commonwealth's website, but however you register, you must do it by May 14th in order to be able to vote in the special election on June 3rd. With respect to the annual town meeting, which starts on May 13th, the budget books are now available. Some of you may already have picked them up on your way in. If you haven't done so, perhaps you could do it on the way out this evening. The more people that pick up the budget books, the less we have to spend on postage sending it out to town meeting members. They'll be available here this evening. They are available. They'll be available in the town clerk's office Friday, tomorrow, and Monday. After that, they will have to be mailed out. So if you can pick them up, you save the town some money. Also, the budget book is available on the homepage of the town and can be downloaded to your computer or a tablet or a phone or wherever you want to download it. It's called FY 2020 Budget Recommendations. That's the entire budget book. Spiral bound this year, new feature, instead of the traditional 3-ring binders. So pick those up. I want to welcome everyone who's here this evening, especially the new members and visitors. For the new members, we had an informational session a few weeks ago on April 10th at, we call it Town Meeting 101. I want to thank the people who came to that. We had 30, by my count, 30 of the 38 new town meeting members. That was a pretty good turnout. And I want to thank Mary Lou Folan, Tom McQuaid, Alan Slater, Paul Bishop, and Bill Plasko, who helped with the presentations and questions. This evening, also, I want to welcome our Congressman, Stephen Lynch, who's home from Washington and able to speak with us tonight to give us a brief report on matters that affect our congressional district and our own town. So, Congressman Lynch.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. David, thank you very much. I do understand there are important matters on the warrant, and Moderator Hearn is very strict on time here. So let me just say that there have been a lot of activities in the Congress that have been widely discussed and in the press. I do want to say I strive mightily to avoid any politics during my addresses to town meeting. This is not the place for it. And besides, I think David would be the first to cut me off if I tried. But I am on two of the committees that are committees of jurisdiction for the Mueller report that recently was issued. And so those committees have active subpoenas that are out. And so that work continues. I do want to say, though, that I was elected to represent you in the United States Congress. I was elected to do a certain job that I've been given. And I just want to tell you that regardless of where we stand politically, I understand that my responsibility is to do the job that you sent me to do it in a manner that is professional and respectful, but gets the job done that you sent me to Washington to do. And that's the attitude with which I approach the work that you've given me, and I hope to always live up to your highest expectations. And also to get on to the things that we need to do on behalf of this country that are separate and apart from the political discussions in Washington, D.C. We're very much in need of a major transportation bill. I was recently, when my colleague Mike Capuano lost his re-election, I was asked to take his seat on the Transportation Committee, and very happy to do that because we are negotiating a $1.2 to $1.5 trillion bill to basically redo America's infrastructure over the next 10 years. So I'll be at the table on behalf of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts as the only member of Congress on that committee. But I realize that the obligation is not just to my district, but to the entire state. The three committees I've been appointed to, subcommittees on the Transportation Committee, the Committee on Aviation, and I know Norwood has a general aviation airport, so that I could be helpful in that regard. We also have some major issues with airplane noise and emission. Last week I was down, 2 weeks ago, I was down at the FAA headquarters down in South Jersey, meeting with the FAA leadership and explaining to them what the difficulties that we have with this new next-gen RNAV navigation system. I'm also a new member of the Water Systems and Environment Subcommittee. And I know that Bernie Cooper has reached out to me in the past on some dredging issues in Norwood regarding some of the ponds in Norwood. I've received similar requests from the folks, our neighbors in Walpole. And so what I'd like to do with Bernie's help and the Conservation Commission is to invite our friends from the Army Corps of Engineers to do a little tour of the dams, especially the publicly owned dams, and the pond situation. Hopefully we can expedite the dredging process to get those ponds back and the streams back to a healthy situation, because the silt built up and the lack of flow there is creating environmental problems, I think, that will only get worse if we don't address them. The other subcommittee I've been asked to serve on is the one on pipelines and rail. And so we've had some, as you know, up in Merrimack Valley, we've had some disastrous consequences of faulty pipeline construction. And we've got a couple of situations not far from here in West Roxbury where we've got new high-pressure pipelines that are being brought in to replace the old systems. And what they're doing is taking old 5 pound per square inch piping and replacing it with 50 psi by a factor of 10, increasing the gas pressure. And that has introduced an element of danger. So we'll be working on that. I've got some legislation that would give greater consideration to safety concerns in cities and towns and thickly settled neighborhoods. So let me see. Aviation, pipeline, there's got to be one more. I'm blanking on it. But anyway, as I said, we're currently engaged in an effort to come up with that large bipartisan transportation bill, and I think we'll have significant success on that. And I've also been appointed chairman of the Subcommittee on National Security, which deals with our every issue from cybersecurity to the security of our voting systems. We've just passed a bill to provide for greater resilience on our statewide election systems. Massachusetts is in a very good position. We've got an electronic system with a paper backup, but that is not the case in every state. So there are a number of states that are wholly digital, and we know that foreign interference, Russian hacking, North Korean, Chinese have been interfering with our election systems, and we want to make sure those systems are strengthened before the 2020 election. National security also obviously deals with our men and women in uniform. Currently, we've got about 14,000 troops in Afghanistan, about 5,000 troops in Iraq. I'll be in Afghanistan later in May. We've also got several thousand that are stationed now in Africa. We've opened up a new drone facility in Niger. We've got about 1,000 Marines newly deployed to Darwin, Australia, on the north coast to deal with the situation in the South China Sea. And also, so we want to make sure that our sons and daughters in uniform have the equipment that they need to be successful and to protect themselves. And also, our national security also includes ensuring that our veterans get the proper care and treatment that they may require after serving our country. We are blessed in our area with 3 major VA facilities, one in Brockton, one in West Roxbury, and one in Jamaica Plain. And we continue to monitor the quality of care. And my friend Teddy Mulvihill keeps me posted on an hourly basis of the veterans' needs in Norwood. You could not have a better person representing you and serving our veterans than Teddy Mulvihill. I've got 22 towns and 3 cities, and no one does a better job on behalf of their veterans than Teddy Mulvihill. You should be very proud of him. Norwood has a long and proud tradition of patriotic service to our nation, and the families of Norwood have been exceptional in this regarding their sons and daughters attending the military academies. I have one resident of Norwood who is about to graduate from the United States Naval Academy in a few weeks, and that is Isabella Aspinwall. Bella Aspinwall is the daughter of Jack and Valerie, 111 Cross Street. She is a Norwood High School student, a graduate, and obviously a graduate of the class of 2019. I have understood, we keep close tabs on our kids, and Bella has done exceptionally. You should be enormously proud of her. She's a heck of a hockey player, from what I hear from the folks at the Naval Academy, and her choice upon graduation, she's been accepted to the flight school in Pensacola, Florida, so she wants to fly. And we're extremely proud of her. She follows a long list of Norwood sons and daughters who have been admitted to the Naval Academy and to the United States Military Academy at West Point. So very proud of her and an exceptional job that she has done. In closing, I want to thank you for being involved in town meeting. You know, Norwood is a shining example of what's best about America. You care about your seniors, do a great job there. You care about your veterans, and you care about your kids. And you can see that every single day in the daily life here in Norwood, Massachusetts. I am enormously grateful for the honor of representing you in the United States Congress. I am really thankful for that. It is a joy. It is a joy to represent you. You know, I know it may look difficult, you know, from the news, but I'll tell you, it's just, like I say, it's an honor and a joy for me to represent you in Washington, D.C. Thank you very much. May God bless Norwood and God bless these United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Lynch. A couple of more items before we get going. Let me just announce, when we take up Articles 5, 6, and 7, which involve proposed amendments to the zoning bylaw, I will step down as moderator. As many of you know, I'm involved in a lot of zoning work on behalf of clients, and while I don't have anything presently connected with most of what we're going to be talking about, I think it's better that I step down. I've asked Mike Riley, who's a town meeting member from District 1, if he would step in. He's indicated he's willing. He's done this before and still was willing to do it. And so perhaps if someone would make a motion to elect him as temporary moderator for Articles 5, 6, and 7, we could do that. Mr. McFarland, seconded by Ms. Gilchrist. All right, any other discussion on that? All those in favor, please say aye. And those opposed? And that is done. Now, a couple of remarks about procedure. We've been away from this for several months. Remember, anyone who wants to speak about a matter must first be recognized by the moderator, and usually you raise your hand for that. If you're called upon to speak, please rise immediately so that the runners with the microphones can find you and get to you efficiently. If you're a town meeting member, when you get the microphone, identify yourself by your name and district number. If you are somebody else, say a resident who's speaking on a matter, not a town meeting member, please identify yourself by your name and street address. Anybody who's speaking as a representative of a group has to indicate his or her name and identify the group that is represented. You can speak from where you are, or you can come down to the front. Usually speaking from where you are is fine, but sometimes people have a lot of papers or exhibits, and they may want to come down to the front. That's fine. Remember that speakers are limited to 5 minutes, with certain exceptions. If you need an extension, you might ask for it at the beginning of your speech, but you're only allowed one extension, so be judicious in asking for those. Remember that, and I'm sure everybody does, when we're listening to a speaker, it's our practice not to applaud, not to jeer, not to otherwise demonstrate approval or disapproval of what the speaker is saying. It's also our custom and practice to listen carefully and respectfully, regardless of our individual feelings on a topic. Those who are speaking should remember that attacks on persons or groups are not permitted. However strongly someone might feel about something, however strongly you may feel that the prior speaker was wrong, unfair, misguided, or whatever, no speaker should directly attack that person or that person's character or that person's motivation. We don't allow transgressions of those rules. Remember that if you want to end debate, you can move the question. However, you can't do that if you've been speaking. So if you want to move the question, that's the only thing you say when you get up. If the motion is seconded, we proceed immediately to vote on that under our rules, and it requires a 2/3 vote to move the question. Now, we have several matters where we have registered speakers. People register in advance because they want to be sure they get to speak. And in fairness to the registered speakers and to the body in general, no registered speaker may move the question, and any attempt to do so will be ruled out of order. Remember to address the moderator. Even if you have a question for the selectmen or the FinCom or something, it's through you, Mr. Moderator, to the FinCom, can you explain such and such? We're here tonight, and whenever we come together as town meeting, to consider and act upon the important issues that have been presented to the town. All of us want what is best for Norwood. We may have different ideas of what is best, but all of us want what is best. And even when there are strong disagreements, we discuss it here. We listen to the other person. This is democracy in action. So it's good for our town that we do this. And I think it's good that so many people have become involved in the different issues we have. They're willing to invest their time and their energy. So regardless of the outcome of the debates, here or at any town meeting, it's a good thing for the town if people continue to be engaged. Everybody, hopefully, will do their part with civility, with fairness, and with a recognition of the common good that we're all working for. So that's sort of my reminder remarks. And with that, we move into the articles and the motions. Article 1, we have a motion from the Board of Selectmen. Is that right, Mr. Bishop? Yes, sir. All right.
Mr. Moderator, Paul Bishop from District 2. Article 1, to see if the town will vote to accept the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 138, Section 12, as follows, or take any other action.
Wait a minute, Mr. Bishop, you can just read the motion part.
Thank you, sir. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen that the town accept the provisions of Mass General Law, Section 138, Section 12, as follows. In any city or town which votes to accept this provision of this paragraph, a common victualler who holds a license under this section to sell wines and malt beverages may, upon written approval, also sell liqueurs and cordials pursuant to said license, subject, however, to all other licensing provisions of this chapter. On the motion, Mr. Moderator.
Mr. Bishop?
This is the Vico Italiano Ristorante located at 89 Central Street. They have been asked by a lot of their customers if they could have a cordial after their meal, which they cannot. Now, a cordial could be a Grand Marnier, a little pony glass. It could be a glass of a little small little Chambord, grappa. It's an after-dinner cordial, and it's a part of the experience of the meal. And this is what they'd like to do. I personally see no problem with this whatsoever. It will be served at their table. It's not to be taken outside and consumed outside. It will be part of the restaurant experience and the dining experience itself. If we have any further questions this evening, I know one of the owners of the establishment is here, that she may have an opportunity also to answer any questions. But again, they qualify, they have a common victualer's license, they have a beer and wine license. It's a restaurant that's been doing business for some time now with no repercussions in a negative way whatsoever. And again, they just want to have something after a meal. Some people may want to have a coffee, some people may want to have a cordial. And that's where we're trying to give them that opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Any discussion on this? Mr. Easy.
Paul Easy, District 3. I'm not opposed to this, but my question to you, Mr. Moderator, does this apply to all the restaurants that hold a beer and wine license, or only this specific restaurant?
It would apply to any restaurant that holds a license to sell wines and malt beverages, and they would have to apply to the Board of Selectmen.
Okay, thank you.
All right. And to the Selectmen, it follows the usual licensing procedure, which would include also review by the Alcoholic Beverages Control Commission, correct?
Correct. They have to carry out all the usual provisions.
All right. Any other discussion? Yes. Ms. Montgomery.
Donna Montgomery, District 6. Mr. Moderator, I'm concerned about the alcoholic content of the cordials and whether they will be limited to only after dinner, or there'll be now aperitifs. And so you're going to have an aperitif, and then a bottle of wine, and then a cordial after dinner. And I know there's all kinds of alcoholic controls, but it just concerns me because usually an aperitif has a higher alcohol content than just rum or vodka. Thank you.
Mr. Bishop?
Mr. Moderator, to answer that question, the ownership would be responsible like any other ownership of a liquor establishment. Most of the time, if not all of the time, the employees are tips trained. They are trained in observing the customer to make sure they're not intoxicated or potentially intoxicated. As far as alcohol content, it may vary from one drink to another. For instance, a can of beer, some of them could have 3.5% alcohol, some of them go up to 8.9, and so on and so on. So it depends on the actual cocktail itself, or in this case, cordial. But normally they'd be in a small little pony glass that only holds about 2 ounces of alcohol. And again, it may not be that. It may be an Irish coffee, where they have a cup of coffee with some Bailey's Irish cream in it, or something like that, or Irish whiskey. There's different variations of cordials. Does that answer your question?
Mr. Moderator, it does answer part of my question, but the other part of my question really is about the proof of the cordials and so on. It's my understanding that I don't have this correct, and perhaps Deputy Chief Kelly may have an answer to this, but that like 3 beers is equal to, let me see, a 12-ounce beer is equal to a 4-ounce glass of wine, which is equal to a 1-ounce shot of like vodka or something in the amount of alcohol that's in it. And cordials, as far as I know, are at the higher end of the amount of alcohol that is actually in the beverage. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor?
Jean Taylor, District 8. I'm just standing to encourage a yes vote on this. We've worked hard to give beer and wine licenses to certain restaurants, and I trust that the selectmen will not just hand them out if somebody has had violations, and that they'll be cautious on when they give them out. But I just stand to encourage a yes vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. All right, in the back, Mr. Catania.
Hi, Dave Catania, District 3. This is my area professional, my job. So I can tell you exactly what a cordial license allows people to serve. By state law, it is an unaged spirit, 2.5% sugar by weight, and natural flavoring. So that is not respective to proof. So you can have a 70 proof vodka that's flavored, a 70 proof rum. I mean, I'm in favor of this because I think that responsible consumption and having the ability for a restaurant to serve different offerings to their consumers, and it is the most profitable item the restaurant can do. I'm in favor of this. How does it impact me financially? Not one bit. But I just want to make clear that when you understand a cordial license, it does open many other things rather than just Irish cream, for example.
Thank you. Mr. Hall.
John Hall, District 6. I just want to underscore a point that a couple of the earlier speakers made, which is that your total alcohol consumption at a meal is not primarily, certainly not entirely, dictated by the proof content of any one drink. It's the whole total. And for that, the people in charge of the restaurant are responsible for making sure that you don't exceed that limit. As someone who has eaten many meals that involved a cocktail, portion of a bottle of wine, and a cordial afterwards, and come out none the worse for wear, I think we can trust the responsible restaurants of Norwood to do the right thing.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Ms. Bailey? Wait a minute. Take the microphone, please.
Patty Bailey, District 6. Move the question, please.
Ms. Bailey's moved the question, and it's been seconded by Ms. Slater. On moving the question, this requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. That has carried. All right, we proceed to vote on the motion, which is that the town accept the provisions of General Laws, Chapter 138, Section 12, which allows a common victualler holding a license to sell wines and malt beverages may, upon approval of the Selectmen and the Licensing Board and the ABCC, also sell liqueurs and cordials pursuant to the license. That's a paraphrasing of it, but that's what it's about. All right, on that, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. That has carried unanimously. We move on to Article 2. We have a motion by the Board of Selectmen. Mr. Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paul Bishop, District 2, recommended by the Board of Selectmen that the town petition the Massachusetts Legislature for adoption of legislation to provide an additional liquor license for on-premises consumption at the site of the Skating Club of Boston, located at 750 University Avenue, Norwood, Massachusetts, in the following or in any other form set forth by the warrant. On the
And,
motion,
Mr.
Moderator.
Bishop, when you're referring to the following or any other form, you're referring to the actual language that's contained in the warrant, and you're not going to read all that for us, but anybody who has read the warrant knows what it is. Mr. Bishop, did you want to speak to this?
Yes, sir, if I could.
Yes.
We have been at this for quite some time, especially Mr. Pelasco, to bring the very distinguished, in my opinion, Skating Club of Boston here to Norwood. They have a long history. Sonia Henney skated with them, more recently Nancy Kerrigan, and so on and so on. They have decided to develop a property at 750 University Avenue. There is going to be 3 rinks, as most people know, with the possibility of a 4th. They will have international and national events there over the course of the year. The only thing they do not have is a liquor license, and the Board of Selectmen does not have one to offer to them. So we're asking permission to go to the legislature and petition them to create an on-premises all-alcohol beverage license for that location. Again, they're a very responsible group. They've been in Brighton for over 100 years, I believe. And if anybody has any questions in depth, the executive director is here this evening to answer. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. All right, discussion on this. Ms. Gilchrist.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Robin Gilchrist, District 7. Through you, question, do they currently have a liquor license?
I'm sorry?
Do they currently possess a liquor license?
Where they are now?
Where they are now in Brighton?
Gentlemen, do you, an AAB license, all alcoholic beverages, or is it limited? Okay.
Okay. Follow-up question, will this
Yes.
license vary from that?
Mr. Bishop, is this proposed to be a permanent 365-day-a-year license?
Yes, sir, regular license, and it's also important to note it's restricted to this particular site. If they decide to move out of town for some reason or get rid of the license, it cannot leave that location. It can't go to Route 1 somewhere. It has to stay at 750 University Avenue.
Okay.
Thank you.
And it's also a $25 million
Wait a minute,
facility.
wait a minute. Mr. Bishop, Ms. Gilchrist, you all set? Okay, that's all right. He answered the question, and we'll go on. Anyone else? Yes. Ms. Numi?
Kelly Numi, District 5. I think this is great to bring into the town. I know we've been wanting a skating rink for a while. My only concern would be, what is the main use of the facility? Is it for children's events, like figure skating practice and stuff like that? Because that would give me some sort of concern about granting an all-access, 365, 24 hours a day liquor license to this facility, if that's what the purpose of it is? Or is it more for national competitions and events, which, you know, that kind of stuff would more warrant it? That would be my question.
Maybe we could ask the gentleman from the skating club, come up here if you would. You can use this microphone and identify yourself, sir, and maybe you could answer some of those questions.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'm Doug Zegheib, Executive Director of the Skating Club of Boston, and it's actually, it's multiple uses. So we have national and international events, and we would like to serve alcohol to spectators. We also have private receptions for the officials that come in from around the country and around the world, and those are private within the club lounge, so it's restricted to everybody of drinking age. Then during the regular season of the club, we'll have Friday night dinners or special send-offs where the membership comes together as a community to wish the kids best of luck. There's a dinner, and then again, it's restricted areas where there is drinking, usually in the club lounge, and you're only allowed in if you're of drinking age. And then we have professional servers who are trained in distributing liquor, and they check for IDs and so forth. So it's not like once you're in the door, you can have at it. Does that help? Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
While we have this gentleman here, are there any particular questions for this gentleman? And otherwise, we'll go back to calling on the members. In the back, yes.
Ted Clark, District 9. My only question is, have you had any violations in the Brighton location?
No, we haven't.
Thank you. Any other questions? Ms. Donahue?
Helen Donahue, District 6. Move the question.
Thank you. All right. On moving the question, all those in favor, please say, who seconded that, by the way? Okay. I'm sorry. On moving the question, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. The question has been moved. We proceed now to vote on the motion by the selectmen, which is to petition the legislature for legislation to provide an additional liquor license for on-premises consumption at the site of the Skating Club of Boston, 750 University Avenue in Norwood, under the conditions set forth in the warrant. On that, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. That has carried unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. We move on now to Article 3. Motion by the Board of Selectmen. Mr. Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen that the town adopt the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 60, Section 3, Ds and Delta of the General Laws, entitled, and I quote, City or Town Aid to Elderly and Disabled Taxation Fund, Voluntary Checkoff Donations, as set forth in the warrant. On that motion, sir?
Mr. Bishop.
I'd like to defer to the town manager.
Mr. Basuko.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This article is required by the state to allow us to set up a voluntary donation fund that would be able to help low-income seniors and disabled individuals pay their taxes. It's completely voluntary. Residents would make voluntary donations. The amount of donations we get would determine what we're able to actually give out. Folks would go through an application process. Under statute, determining the qualifications for the process would be the assessor, the treasurer, and 3 residents. It would then be managed by the Council on Aging staff, similar to a program that the town of Westwood uses. So all we need is authorization from town meeting to be able to set up this program. Folks could donate money, and then low-income seniors and disabled individuals could apply to the fund and use those funds to offset their tax bill. And we'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has.
All right.
Yes, it's completely.
Ms. Haley, you're next.
I'm voting in favor of this because I do know of the
Wait a
needs.
minute, Ms. Haley.
Yes?
You want to identify yourself for the world.
Sorry, Ann Haley, District 4.
Thank you.
I'm voting for this because I do believe that this is something that we've needed for a long time, and something that caught my interest when I heard people talking about it. But one thing I would like is that if for both this and the next article, that there is a report to town meeting on these funds that are collected and how they are dispersed. That's it.
All right. Yes. Yes, I was getting to that. Thanks. I'm a little bit out of practice, but thank you.
Julie Donnelly Matthews, District 3. I love this. Bravo to whoever wrote this. This is a great start. It's not enough. I would love to see something that's mandatory, something that helps us to all share in the tax burden equally. We all have got to come together on this and to understand that We all do better when we all do better. Bravo to whoever did this. I'll be voting in favor of it, and please everyone do the same.
Thank you. Yes, lady right there.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Rachel Churchill, a new member of District 5. I look forward to working with everyone here collaboratively to help all of the residents of our town. Thomas Jefferson first made the axiomatic statement that the government closest to the people serves the people best. And I believe that the services the town of Norwood does, can, and should provide and administer to all of its residents are the most important and the most deeply impactful public services that a person can receive, because they are made in the context of a community that knows and cares about each member. And this is why I chose to become a town meeting member. I would like to use my time to publicly support this Article 3 and also the next Article 4, which provides similar relief to the members of our community. We've just received a lot of detail, and the warrant is straightforward, but I want to reiterate a few points and add some color based on my wonderful conversations that I've had with Ms. McCarthy, our director of the Senior Center, and Mr. Mulvihill, our director of Veteran Services. Both of them showed me a depth of knowledge and passion for this town and for everyone that they work with, and we are lucky to have both of them. I just want to echo what Congressman Lynch said. The unfortunate reality is that we have community members who are struggling and have fears about their economic futures and comfort. We currently have many services and support offered and administered, and after speaking with the directors, the scope of the services is truly amazing. But notwithstanding all of these many programs I'm sure they would love to talk with all of you about, I strongly believe we need to show support in a manner that's in addition to and more flexible than what is currently afforded, particularly in light of the dire financial situation our town finds itself in. The fund to be established under this Article 3 will assist senior and disabled residents in the payment of their town taxes. Ms. McCarthy tells me, and please let me know if I mischaracterize anything, is that even if someone otherwise falls short of qualifying thresholds under other existing tax programs, the guidelines are intended to be established to be considered on a case-by-case basis with consideration of extenuating circumstances, hopefully being built into the program. That's the intent, and that she will see to it that no applicant falls through the cracks. The fund to be established under the next Article 4 will provide support for veterans and their dependents for food, transportation, heat, and oil. A veteran should never have to choose between paying to heat her home or feeding her family or paying her tax bill. We should make certain that she can do both. And while Mr. Mulvihill passionately, I could truly tell that, provides wonderful services to our Norwood veterans through state programs and guidelines, our veterans would be best served with additional discretion and funds to support them even more. Approving Articles 3 and 4 don't cost anyone anything, funded entirely by voluntary contributions, as Mr. Mizuko said. While voluntary, I hope that not only do we establish these funds, but that we would see immediate and significant contributions as we rally around our most revered and sometimes, unfortunately, most vulnerable residents. I pray most of us have the comfort of knowing that a new expensive $30 a month would not have a significant impact on our livelihoods or lifestyles, but some of our community members and neighbors do. And I would like us to all rally around them, practically speaking, and address those concerns. To contribute $1 or $5 or $30 as a meaningful impact, an impactful gesture to say we are here to support each other. And I urge approval of both Articles 3 and 4 to please show our neighbors that we are one community, one family, and one Norwood. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Churchill. And I must apologize to you. I had the wrong sheet in front of me. You were registered to speak, and I missed you because I was looking at the wrong notes as I was keeping track of everyone, but thank you. Anyone further? She was the only registered speaker, and I missed her. Yes. Ms. Hopcroft.
Thank you, Barbara Hopcroft, District 1. I wonder if there's someone here who could explain to us what the current program is within the town of Norwood to help seniors who are having difficulty paying their property taxes, where those funds currently come from, and how many approximately people may be taking advantage of such a program. That's for the elderly. And if Mr. Mulvihill might, through you, Mr. Moderator, might be able to describe what kind of shortfall there might be with the other funding that is provided to the Veterans Office that is now currently not being met. Thank you.
All right, with respect to the Article 4, we will not take that up now. We'll wait to hold Mr. Mulvihill to answer that question, Ms. Hopcroft, when we get to 4. Who can answer the question with respect to 3? Mr. McDonough? With respect to Article 3.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and through you to the membership. Currently, there are 2.
Tim, Mr. McDonough is the chief assessor of the town.
I'm sorry, I should
He's
give my
the one who
title.
decides how much we pay in taxes. Not really.
That's the selectman. I just help him.
He just tells them how much it's worth.
That's right.
Thank you, Mr. McDonough.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So currently, there is a state law that allows for seniors over the age of 70 to get $500 a year in tax relief. It's based upon being over 70 in income limitations, which is approximately for a single person, $22,000, and for a married couple, $38,000. And the second part of that is we have to be able to review how much they have in assets, in retirement accounts, and the state sets the guidelines, we administer it. And every year we have, on average, 35 to 50 people who apply for that. That is really the only program that we have right now that allows for tax relief. The second program is a senior tax work-off, where individuals can work for the town and be paid an hourly rate to help offset their taxes. So those are the only 2 existing programs. This particular program, I spoke with the assessor in Westwood today, and they've had great success with it. Obviously, they're a little more affluent than Norwood, and their assessed values on average are higher. But I would strongly, and the Board of Assessors would strongly endorse approval of this to help our seniors. It's a great program that it won't be a lot of money, but from what I've seen every day in my office with seniors coming in, any little bit would help. And if we can help our seniors, then obviously that's what our goal is.
Thank you, Mr. McDonough. Are there questions for Mr. McDonough on first? Yes, Mr. Shaughnessy.
Thank you. Kevin Shaughnessy, District 6. Tim, I'm just curious how it would work. I know, like for myself, I don't really see you pay your mortgage and your tax bill gets paid. Would there be some form of a online way to do it, or would you just check off like a box that says, $5, $10, or how exactly would that work?
Mr. Moderator, through you, I think the intent of this article this evening is just to form a committee that would decide how it's going to be allocated, and then we'd be working closely with the director of the Senior Center, Kerry McCarthy. And that's very important to note because Kerry is the one that sees the seniors on a day-to-day basis, and she might be able to identify people much easier than I would. But it would be, I'm sure it would be based upon income and need, and obviously an age eligibility. And Westwood has been kind of a model. They've been doing it for many years now. And the town in Westwood actually matches what they raise. I'm not saying that's going to happen in Norwood, but hopefully down the road that might be something that be entertained. But Kerry McCarthy would be the one that would really be able to tell the town treasurer, this person deserves some money off their taxes because they're definitely in need.
Thank you. These questions for the assessor? All right. Mr. Farini?
Rob Farini, District 1, through you, Mr. Moderator. I was just wondering who determines the criteria of elderly and disabled person of low income?
Well, the state...
Wait a minute.
Oh,
Are you
I'm
referring to under the present law, or are you referring to this proposal?
This proposal says that defraying the real estate taxes of elderly and disabled persons of low income. I'm just wondering who determines the criteria of who is elderly or disabled of low income.
Mr. Moderator, I
Yes.
think Mr. Mizuko.
Mr. Mizuko.
is a part of that.
So there's sort of two parts to that. One is if you're defined as elderly for any other tax programs or disabled for any other programs in the state, but you also have a local committee that's put together by statute that includes the assessor, the treasurer, and 3 residents that determine the parameters of the program, and then the actual funding decisions would be made by the senior center director, having sort of experience in those items and knowing the clientele better to speak. So the assessor, the treasurer, and a committee of residents will decide this is sort of our income level, this is the upper level, the lower level, and they'll sort of build that on how they can help other programs and where we're seeing shortfalls. One of the challenges we have with finding resources for seniors is that oftentimes you get locked into a program has too strict of a guideline, and the income cutoff is $42,000 and they're making $42,700 and they're done and they're out. So this will give a little bit of flexibility there. And Mr. Moderator, if you would entertain, there were just 2 other items on this I wanted to mention, just related to the senior tax work-off.
About the, well, okay.
There's just, the program would work through as a tax insert, so there'll be an insert that would actually go into your tax bill, completely voluntary whether or not you want to send that back with a check. We are going to explore whether there's an online option, but we haven't found any other towns doing that yet, but that shouldn't be too difficult to set up. And then there's 2 other similar, one other program that seniors are able to apply to. It's known as a circuit breaker program, and that's a rebate through your income taxes. This year, the Senior Center, every year they have a counselor that helps seniors work through that program. $82,000 was given back to seniors through the circuit breaker program as well. So that's an additional program. And the senior director and I are actually looking at 2 more options in the next year. One which would create a program through potentially community preservation funds where you could help low-income seniors who are renters as opposed to just property owners. And then there's a statute that we're looking at that you can adopt that would allow folks in the senior tax work-off program, if they're seniors who are disabled and unable to work, they could actually have somebody work for them and they would receive the tax credit. So this is sort of the beginning of looking into finding as many programs as we can in as many ways as we can to assist seniors and low-income individuals in the community.
Thank you. Mr. McDonough, one more point on that, on Article 3?
Just one last point, Mr. Moderator. There is also an additional state circuit breaker, and I'm not sure if that's what the manager was talking about, but Representative John Rogers is going to be dropping off some applications, and it comes off your state income tax. So that's one additional avenue that could be explored for seniors. It's a kind of relatively new program, but Representative Rogers has been very proactive in getting involved and making sure that the seniors are there. The chairman of the Board of Selectmen and I, Mr. Bishop, will be going up to speak to the seniors either next week or the week after and kind of give the various options of tax relief for seniors.
Thank you. All right, back to Mr.
Moderator.
Farini. Do you have a further question related to Article 3?
Yes, back to my original question. So if I understand correctly, the committee will decide on a case-by-case basis who is eligible.
The yellow sheet says the committee's charge is to adopt rules and regulations to carry out the provisions of this section and to identify the recipients of such aid. Does that mean that the committee identifies who gets the aid? Is that your question?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the question. The committee decides the parameters, who's eligible to receive aid, but then we don't have enough money to, obviously, if you have a situation where you have 500 people apply and you've only got $1,000. So
the question is...
I'm getting to the answer if you just let me finish.
All right.
The committee sets the parameters of who is eligible. The actual decisions will be made by the Council on Aging Director.
All right. Did that answer the question, Mr. Farini? Okay. All right, Mr. Bergeron.
Michael Bergeron, District 1. I think Norwood has a proud tradition of compassion, and I believe if Westwood can do it, we can do it, and we should do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Mary Paz, District 6. What I would like to know is
or might like you to consider, is that when you do this, that you make it possible for people who are renters like myself to be able to contribute to this. And so, of course, I wouldn't see it because I don't have a property tax. But if there's a way to include everybody in the town of Norwood, that would be great.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Taylor.
Jack Taylor, District 8. Mr. Moderator, I move the question.
Mr. Taylor moved the question, seconded by Mr. Shea. All right, on moving the question, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. The question has been moved. We proceed to vote on the motion under Article 3, that the town adopt the provisions of General Laws, Chapter 60, Section 3D, regarding a voluntary checkoff donation for the benefit of to aid the elderly and disabled. On that, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. That is carried unanimously. All right, we move on to Article 4, a motion by the Board of Selectmen. Mr. Bishop.
Moderator. Recommended by the Board of Selectmen that the town adopt the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 60, Section 3F of the General Laws, entitled, and I quote, voluntary donation to multiple assistance for veterans by designation on municipal property tax and motor vehicle excise tax as set forth in the warrant. On the motion, sir?
Mr. Bishop.
If you follow along on your page 3 of your yellow sheets in the warrant, article, paragraph 5, and I quote, the town already provides assistance to our veterans by way of the Veteran Services appropriation in the annual budget. However, the financial eligibility guidelines through that program are set forth by the state and are very stringent, very difficult to stay within those boundaries. Your acceptance of this law would allow the Veterans Director to reach out and to serve more veterans of all ages facing difficult circumstances that might not otherwise qualify for this assistance. So as you can see, it very much mimics the prior motion that we just had, Section 3, Article 3 rather, and that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. Any discussion on this? Ms. Howard.
Judith Howard, District 3. Does this come once a year, or does it come on the quarterly tax bills?
Good question. Is it intended that this would be with each of the bills or once a year? Does anybody know? Maybe we don't.
Sorry, Mr. Moderator.
Yes.
We intend to include the alternate yearly between the senior insert being in the property tax bill and the veterans insert being in the excise tax bill. We'll rotate them. We'll really have to see what the public is more responsive to, whether once a year as it's sort of an annual appeal will generate the most revenue, or if we include them quarterly, if we could save the paper cost in doing it once a year and get the same amount of money. So because the program's new, we're going to have to feel that out as time goes on.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Haley?
Ann Haley, District 4. I wonder if somebody can tell us where the criteria is going to be published so that people know whether or not they're eligible. And I just think the population that we're addressing might miss the message. And that something is available for them. So I'd like to know if anybody's got any great ideas about how to get this out to the population.
Mr. Basuco?
So one of the advantages we have is a lot of the population this would serve are actually already coming into our offices, whether it's the Veterans Office or the Senior Center, and we're finding we don't always have the means to serve them because of the limitations of the existing programs. We continue with our electronic means and getting the information out there as much as we can, but we're already seeing a lot of the clients, and sometimes there's referrals from other agencies. They're coming in, and there's just sometimes we're not able to assist them with the current framework of the aid programs that we have.
All right. Now, earlier, Ms. Hopcroft had a question that also, I think, included Mr. Mulvihill's thoughts on this. So I deferred that question till now. Mr. Mulvihill, Ms. Hopcroft, was your question, how is this, what was your question? I don't remember all of it. All right, maybe you could, here's a microphone.
How much money would there be in gaps for this kind of a benefit based on what is currently coming in from various sources to fund individual veteran needs?
Did you get that, Mr. Mulvihill? All right. Mr. Mulvihill is our Veteran Service Agent, and he's most familiar with this.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ted Mulvihill, District 6, Director of Veteran Services at the town. Through you to the question, I can't speak as to the allocation of funds, potential funding provided by the passage of this article. I can tell you that the budget given to us in Veteran Services for allocation in direct financial relief to the veterans, widows, and orphans in this town is specifically set and very strictly set, as mentioned, under Chapter 115 of General Laws. Each year, annually, we get a budget from the state, and we must operate under those guidelines, within those parameters, and determining eligibility under those parameters is a very stringent process, because it provides for monies that we allocate, taxpayer money we allocate to our veterans is reimbursed to the town of Norwood in 75% by the state. So the veteran or the widow or the orphan gets help from a town provides help, state provides help to the town, everybody wins. I would urge support of this motion. Anything that we can do to improve the quality of life for our veterans that have served our nation well, I think is a fine thing. And just by way of explanation, there are provisions in our direct relief program for reimbursement of medicines, for example, prescription medications or medical equipment or things of that nature. Those fall under the Chapter 115 requirements. This provision would allow us to, there's no provision under Chapter 115 of Mass General Law now to help a guy whose water heater blows. This provision would allow us flexibility to assist a veteran in a situation like that, where his financial needs fall outside of the general law as currently written.
Thank you. So the question Ms. Hopcroft asked, and I think related also to gaps. In other words, if you've got situations where, because of the requirements of the state law, you're not able to serve people, and this extra money would be used for that?
That's absolutely, clearly, very succinctly put and correct, sir.
Thank you. All right. Are there any, okay, thank you. Ms. Donnelly Matthews? Ms. Donnelly Matthews moves the question. Seconded by Ms. Taylor. On moving the question, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. That has been moved. On the motion, which is, the motion is that the town adopt the provisions of General Laws, Chapter 60, Section 3F, entitled Voluntary Donation to Multiple Veterans Assistance Fund by designation on municipal property tax or motor vehicle excise bills. And that statute is set forth in the warrant. On that, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. That has carried unanimously. We've had 4 in a row that were unanimous. Is that going to happen all night? All right. Mr. Riley's going to come up as the temporary moderator, and the planning board is going to get set in the tables in front here. And let me get out of your way.
This motion, the second paragraph.
Yeah.
Is that a proper form? I mean, I don't even know what that means.
Have they seen it?
Yeah.
I got to stay out of it, but you can ask counsel. All right, here are your speakers. Here are your forms. I'll go take a look.
Thank you. Yeah. All set. Good evening, everybody.
We'll move to Article 5, which is a motion of the Planning Board. And I think I jumped the gun with Mr. Pachakowski. Mr. Pachakowski, you have a motion?
Ernie Pachakowski, District 9, Chairman of the Planning Board. Article 5, recommended by the Planning Board, voted that the town amend zoning bylaw Section 9.4 by deleting the current Section 9.4 and replacing it with a new Section 9.4 as set forth in the warrant. And then I have a recommendation, Mr. Moderator.
Yes.
Article 5, Mixed Use Overlay District. The Planning Board held a public hearing on March 26, 2019 to accept public comments on the zoning bylaw amendment. Approximately 7 people were in attendance. Approximately 4 people commented on the article. 4 people asked questions and stated opinions on specific sections of the bylaw. The Planning Board voted to close the hearing. At their April 8, 2019 meeting, the board voted unanimously 5-0 to recommend approval of this article as amended.
And Mr. Pachakowski, I understand there's a presentation from the board.
There is, Mr. Moderator, and we'll get
proceed.
started on it, and I'll pass the baton. So if you have that, what Article 5, what we're trying to do here is something that I'm very excited about, and if anybody has been at one of the meetings has seen me, we are trying to create an overlay district or a village or whatever you want to call it that is based on current zoning needs and is designed to encourage redevelopment through modern zoning practices. It's something a little different than we've done in this town. It's a completely new way of looking at things, but this is the way towns and cities are going. We want to make our downtown more vibrant, a more consistent district when it comes to everything from streetlights, sidewalks, our buildings using unified design standards. Too often we are losing great projects. They're coming into the planning office and they're asking for what can we do? We have a plan. We want to, we love Norwood. We want to do something downtown. But our current zoning laws are so tight and stringent that they really can't do what they want to do. And what's happening is these great projects are moving on. They're moving to Dedham. They're moving to Dedham Square. They're moving to Walpole. They're moving to Islington, other towns. We're losing out on some tremendous projects. And I just think that, I think through our presentation tonight, you'll see what we're trying to achieve downtown. And I think, my view is, when you have people, businesses will follow the people. And this is, Mr. Halkiotis is going to take us through the first half of this. And just please keep your mind open on this. I think this is a wonderful thing for the town. So I'm going to turn it over to Paul.
Good evening. My name is Paul Halkiotis. I am the Community Planning and Economic Development Director. Article 5 proposed to amend Section 9.4 of the zoning bylaw by deleting that section in its entirety and replacing it with the new section that appears as Article 5 in your warrant. About 8 years ago, the town hired the Cecil Group to do a master plan for the downtown. The principal consultant that worked on the master plan is here this evening, Mr. Ted Brovitz. We hired Ted since he had experience with the downtown and knowledge of it to work with us on implementing one of the key recommendations that was in the downtown master plan. Planning is a forward-thinking exercise. It's not about today, and it's not about the past and yesterday. It's looking ahead, trying to identify trends, and to try to plan for those trends to accommodate future growth. Demographic trends that we've been seeing and living through over the last several years, we all know that things have been changing, that people have changed how they shop. We used to go to downtowns in the old days, then it changed to malls. Now people shop on the internet, and companies like Amazon are dominating the retail market. Things have changed on where people like to live, and the trends have changed away from the American dream of a house in the suburbs with a two-car garage, and they're currently trending more towards people living in downtown areas, near downtowns, and in urban areas. And the two segments of society that we see more interested in that are retirees and young people. We've also changed how we move around in our transportation systems. Now people call Uber, they get a Zip car, they don't all want to own a car, pay car insurance, we've really seen a change in the number of younger people that own automobiles. And people like to take public transportation. As you all know, Norwood has 3 train stations and a bus that comes through town, and a lot of people rely on the MBTA to commute back and forth to work. The trending demographic changes, the household mix has dramatically changed. In 1990, the housing trends were people wanted to live near a golf course or on a golf course, wanted a large backyard, mostly in single-family neighborhoods where the homes look the same. They wanted to drive away from work, go to the suburbs, and escape. And they wanted to have convenient access for their cars. Today, these trends have changed, and many people would prefer to live, work, shop, eat, and play in the downtown area. They're preferring traditional main streets, and we've seen a renaissance of main streets across the country. They want to have sidewalks, crosswalks. They want their downtowns to be more walkable. They want access to public transportation. They want different types of housing choices, not just single-family homes. And they want a shorter commute to work and convenient access to their cars. We're trying to respond to these changes. People have changed how they recreate. They spend time in health clubs, cafes, microbreweries, and work's different nowadays, where people use flex time, they telecommute, they have live workspace, and they're working from home. Because of our changing society and the demographics, we need to change. Our downtown needs to change. We've only had one new development in the downtown in the last 20 years, and that's Olivardi's. And that's a piece of property, a building that we're going to show you and use it as an example of how our downtown could change to become. Coincidentally, Olivardi's is a mixed-use building. So hasn't been any development in 20 years except for one, and it's a mixed use. That's what the real estate market was demanding. There's been no investment or reinvestment in the downtown. There's been very little to no growth, and that's negatively impacting our local economy. As you all know, we have vacant storefronts and vacant upper and lower floors. We also have some marginal businesses. Great if you want to go to the nail salon, if you want a pizza. I love pizza, but we've got about 15 pizza shops within our downtown area. This mixed-use zoning amendment will help to be a catalyst for change. It's been well established that if people live in the downtown area, they'll spend their money downtown, and they'll keep that money local. And that's very important to our local economy. Many communities in Massachusetts have changed their zoning to spur reinvestment in their downtowns. The mixed-use zoning responds to these changes in society. Neighboring towns to Norwood all have development going on right now. All you have to do is get in your car and drive in any direction to Walpole, Canton, Dedham, or Westwood. All of these downtown areas are experiencing redevelopment, reinvestment in their downtowns. Norwood isn't, and it's time to change that. I'm going to hand the microphone over to Mr. Ted Brovitz, president of Brovitz Community Planning, and Ted's the author of this bylaw, and he's going to run through the details of this bylaw for you.
Thank you, Paul.
President and Chief Bottle Washer of Brobitz Community Planning and Design. As Paul mentioned, I worked with the town about 6 years ago in putting together the downtown master plan, and one of the primary recommendations was to introduce mixed use into the downtown area as a real opportunity to try to help local businesses grow and expand, to provide key access to public transportation, to have good access to major employers such as a hospital. It's worked in, as Paul mentioned, numerous towns around New England, around the country, and it really it can really boost the local economy as well as providing housing choices for a variety of different types of people. So we're really focused on the yellow area, which is the central business district. That's the core of downtown. We're talking about Washington Street and Central and Broadway. But we're also incorporating a small piece of property, not a small piece, but an area on the south side of Broadway, which is in the manufacturing district and the general business district. So basically, going down to the railroad tracks to include those properties as well. But the heart is really the central business district that we're talking about. So the first thing we did is we wanted to go back and really understand the characteristics of the downtown properties. If we're going to put together new zoning, we want to make sure it's a good fit, and we're replicating the development patterns, the historic development patterns and densities and layout of buildings that make Norwood unique. So we went back and looked at lot size and frontage and the size of buildings and the height of buildings and so on. And we were kind of surprised to discover that in the downtown today, there's 43 properties that are either residential or mixed use already, and almost 300 dwelling units in the community, in the downtown area, central business district. And some of these, all of them actually you know of. I mean, the bigger ones such as the Crossing with 52 dwelling units per acre in terms of its density, Lexington Station with 30 dwelling units per acre, Olivardi, which was mentioned before, that's 41 units per acre. But also in the Talbot block and the Fulham block, and those are older buildings that have been mixed use for a very long time and are really nice built buildings. Certainly part of our important historic fabric. So if you look at the Talbot block, there's 10 storefronts and there's 35 apartment buildings above that. It's a 45-story, 45 feet in height. And the density works out to be 86 dwelling units per acre. Pretty high density, actually. The Fulham block is a little bit smaller with 6 storefronts and 10 apartments upstairs. Beautiful old building, and the density is 57 dwelling units per acre. And we're really trying to understand in these older buildings what the density is, so that as we set the standards here into this new overlay district, we can be consistent with what we like and what we don't, and avoid what we don't like in the downtown area. So we mentioned Olivardi's. That was, I think, completely redone in 2008. There's 14 apartment buildings above the restaurant. And it's 41 units, works out to 41 units per acre. We also looked at different opportunities for renovation of existing buildings, adding on to existing buildings, as well as opportunities or potential future areas where we might see redevelopment. And those areas are identified, oops, my fault. The areas, some of the properties along Central and Broad Street, or Central Street and Broadway, and then, one-story buildings that are mostly along the Washington Street corridor. A lot of those are historic buildings, but there may be a good opportunity to allow some building above that to support the businesses down below. I think it gets harder and harder these days to support one-story, commercial storefronts. But if you had the opportunity in a tasteful way to build up above, that could really add value to the property, but also add value to the businesses below because you have built-in customers. So we looked at, where those opportunities might be in and around the downtown area. And this is an example, Titani's at 483, where there was a previous addition already put on sometime in the past, but there's also an opportunity to put one on over here, possibly in the future. These are the opportunities we're looking for. Where might we expect new development to occur if it's existing buildings or it's redevelopment? This is an example of a building that was 1 story, and then in 1998, it was turned into 2 stories, office above. And then taking the Olivares development and our building and putting that into dimensional characteristics that we can understand, we basically built a model so that as we move forward in putting together the regulations, we have a better understanding of what works and what doesn't. So here's another example along Central Street, 99. You know, this is the addition that was added to 177. This is a theater, and then if we were to add an addition to 99 Central Street, something that looks like that. Again, you know, giving a tasteful renovation in addition to this old historic building is really what we're trying to capture as part of this zoning bylaw. So looking again at opportunities for development, new development, infill development. You know, if you go down Central and Broad, you see that there's a lot of sort of strip development. There's open parking lots and open curb cuts. There's not a lot of landscaping. There's minimal sidewalks and streetscape. So these are opportunities over time. Nothing's going to happen tomorrow, but incrementally over time, where you might see new development. And if we're going to invite new development, mixed use and residential, we want to make sure that it's high quality and it contributes to the overall, pattern of development and economics of the downtown area. Just other examples of where you might see in the future some redevelopment and thinking about how do we address the lack of sidewalks, the open curb cuts, the parking in front, to make it more of a walkable district, create opportunities for reinvestment, but also at the same time build on the better development patterns that we have, the historic patterns that we have in downtown. So we started to model different ideas of what it might look like if some of these properties were redeveloped, where you now have nice streetscapes, street trees, wide sidewalks, areas where people can, little pocket parks or dining terraces, and then bringing the buildings up to the sidewalks so that you create a better walking environment. So it's a trade-off. If you're trading off these new opportunities for mixed use and for residential development, then we want to make sure it's quality and it's contributing to our walkable downtown district. So this is the map. This is the new zoning map for the proposed mixed-use overlay district. And what the red indicates is that along Washington Street, we want to make sure we secure the business opportunities at street level. So we wouldn't allow residential at street level along that corridor between those blocks, basically past Manhattan, almost the whole way through the central business district. And again, we want to reinforce the cluster of businesses that are there. We want to help them grow and develop, and that's the best opportunity for for business to situate, and it's the most visible space. So anything that would be developed on the corridor would have to be commercial at ground level, and then up above it could be residential or commercial as well. We also have what we call a transitional buffer zone, so that if development occurs in the northern part of the central business district, then we want to make sure that we're protecting the adjoining neighborhood to the north. And that means that there's an additional setback requirement, there's a height restriction so that, and there's a landscaping restriction so that if development occurs in an area, it'll be well buffered, well screened from adjoining residential properties. So really there's 5 areas that we're addressing and controlling in this new proposed district. We're talking about building use and placement, height and design, historic preservation and renovation of existing buildings, residential density, parking and landscaping standards, and quality of open spaces. Those are the main components of this new overlay district. And we talk about use and placement of buildings. We're not changing the use table. All the commercial uses that are allowed in this district today will remain in this district. However, we are introducing residential and mixed-use buildings, and that's the difference. And there's specific standards in terms of the placement of those buildings, because again, we're trying to create enclosure along the sidewalks, so reinforce the walkability and the pedestrian orientation of the district.
So you've got 2 minutes left. Do you want to request
do I
an
really?
extension?
Okay.
Or
There's also, I'm sorry?
You
May I
can
ask
request
you?
an extension if
Yes,
you'd like.
please. May I
How much
request?
time would you like?
I think 10 minutes will probably do it.
Is there a motion to give 10 minutes extension? So moved. There's a second.
It probably won't take that long.
All those in favor? All those opposed? All right, an additional 10 minutes.
Okay, I'll try to be short. There are height standards so that, on Washington Street, we don't want to create a canyon effect with new buildings. So there's a setback and step back requirement at the street. It can be 35 feet, which is about the size of the Follen building. But if it goes up to 45 feet, which is the maximum in the district, it would have to be setback or step back. This being a setback of the building, and then the upper floor is being stepped back to reach that ultimate height that's allowed in the district. And again, we're trying to make sure that if you're walking on the opposite side of the street, you can't see anything beyond that third story. It's all behind the building, so you're keeping the same, character of the street. And as we mentioned, this is not about the use so much as it is about the building. So there's detailed design standards for different types of residential and mixed-use buildings. Again, making sure that they fit into the historic fabric of the current mix of uses and buildings that are there today. So, we've got 4 building types we're introducing under this overlay district. We've got a multifamily building, a row house, which are basically attached single-family houses that are attached with common walls horizontally. We've got a live-work building, which is a small owner-occupied building. Somebody like a CPA or a lawyer or accountant might have an office downstairs and live up above the store. And then we have a larger mixed-use building. All of these have detailed design standards that go with them. And in terms of historic preservation and renovation, there's a series of standards that also ensure that the architectural characteristics of buildings are preserved and introduced in new buildings where it's appropriate. The densities are set at, generally for apartment buildings or multifamily buildings or mixed use, at 20 units per acre. That's slower than a lot of the ones that currently exist in town. That's by right. And then by special permit, they can possibly go up to 32 units per acre by special permit from the planning board, but there has to be a public benefit. And there's sort of a menu of public benefits that would qualify for that additional density. Things like public or publicly accessible open spaces that contribute to the downtown, public parking, energy efficient building design and sustainable standards to your site, streetscape improvements, sidewalks, sidewalk furnishings, additional affordable housing, or the donation of land that could be used for other public purposes that benefit the district. So everything would go back into sort of uplifting the entire district if they decide to seek a density bonus. There's also flexibility in the parking standards, understanding that this is an area where a lot of people will not have 2 cars. A lot of people will walk or take public transit or work in the downtown area. So there's flexibility in terms of allowing for shared parking between adjacent properties or different buildings, different uses in the building. There's also design standards for allowing for structured parking, underground parking or above ground parking if it's feasible. And then there's also design standards for things like tandem parking. So if you have a condominium with 2 people with cars, they would park front to back. And that saves a lot of space in terms of the overall footprint of the surface parking areas, which is good for an area like downtown because there's not a lot of land to use. And in terms of open space, I mean, this is a really important one because, in our general standards, our conventional standards, we might have something that says there's 20% requirement for open space, but typically that's the islands in the parking lot with the trees in it or the patch of grass behind the dumpster. This is ensuring that any kind of open space that's created there on a given lot with a new development has to be quality. They have a sort of a menu to choose from, everything from pocket parks to outdoor seating areas and plazas, even rooftop gardens. So we want to make sure that it's whatever they create on their site is going to be beneficial to the people that live there, but also going to contribute to the overall pedestrian orientation and walkability of the downtown area.
So I think Paul covered a lot of this before. I think, the mixed use bylaw really promotes a vibrant downtown, good walkability, the better use of public transportation, active open spaces. It creates more housing choices for a variety of different people. It helps with, create more private investment and obviously expansion of the tax base, supporting local businesses, and helps to compete with neighboring towns if that's something we're after. But it also, it's trying to reinforce the historic development patterns, architectural character, and the pedestrian orientation of downtown Norwood. So that is what we're proposing to do. I will turn it back to you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a series of registered speakers. First registered speaker is Mr. Shea. And Mr. Shea has indicated that he's requesting an additional 5 minutes for a total of 10 minutes for his presentation. Is there a motion to allow that? Mr. Greeley, is that motion seconded? And on the motion for an additional 5 minutes for Mr. Shea, all those in favor? Opposed? And the motion carries. Go ahead, Mr. Shea.
Thank you. I'm Richard Shea, Town Meeting Member for District 1, and I'm asking you to vote against the document in its current form. I read through the 25 pages of the mixed-use overlay district zoning bylaw changes, both in the warrant and the online version, because I was concerned that maybe I had a bad draft, and think that there's many problems that have nothing to do with the policies it wants to represent. If someone wanted to take advantage of this document, the many errors and unclear parts could make it difficult to protect the town. When I read a document like this, as I've done as part of my many jobs, I'm reading it to understand what it says, not whether I agree with it. The Social Security Administration regulations, how the internet turns google.com/cat videos into a cat video that you actually see. It's all math behind the scenes, and it's complicated. Verizon's security and IT policies, nobody cared if I liked them or not. I just had to make them work, and that's the way I read a document. And that's how I read the MUOD. And a document this long would be expected to have a few typos or spelling errors, but basically I was unnerved by what I found. And I'm just going to spend my remaining time going through these items one at a time, just pointing them out, okay? So it's going to be really boring, sorry. 9.4.7.1, quote, minimum area space T space A given, end quote. What's missing? 9.4.7.1, minimum lot sizes are defined in 9.4.8, but it doesn't define the minimum lot size in all 4 building types. We'll get to that in a minute. 9.4.7.3, despite being required in the text, many 9.4.8 entries have N/A for the entries, 1A, 1C, and 1D. 9.4.7.8, as near as I can tell, step back is not a word. It also occurs again in Figure 6. Could you put up slide 1 for me, please? I have a few slides. All right, in green, you can see that Table 1B, that row house, townhouse buildings, and this is extracted from the table. You can see there's a minimum lot size, a frontage, and a lot depth. Great. In 1A, and also in 1C and 1D, it's NA for the minimum lot size. There's a frontage, but no lot depth. In my mind, you have like X times Y equals Z, and you need 2 of them. And then you can figure out the other, but you still need 2, okay? It seems to be a problem as near as I can tell. Table 9, I'm done with this slide, please, but we don't need to go to the next one yet. 9.4.9, Table 2, rear addition, quote, rear yard line, end quote. It's not defined, probably the rear setback. Side addition, quote, side yard line, not defined. Also, facade modulation length, I couldn't find a definition for that either. 9.4.14.3, Table 4, quote, 1.5 spaces per DU. Surprisingly, DU, I'm sure it means dwelling unit, but it's not actually defined in the document. The requirement of 1.5 spaces for each 2-bedroom dwelling unit, as worded, conflicts with Note 1, which is that the minimum equals the maximum without a waiver. So what is 1.5 parking spaces? 9.4.14.3. Following Table 4, the outline numbering appears to break down, so I'm going to have to say something like the second time. So 9.4.1, the second time, .c, car sharing programs. I'm not sure how you do that as a zoning thing. It's not a building, it's not a lot, it's kind of a promise, not even a contract. So I think that's a problem. 9.4.14.2, the second time, .2.c. Must openings as opposed to windows be backlit? Also, back-lit is incorrect. Backlit is one word, at least that's what Merriam-Webster says. 9.4.15, table 5.3, quote, include access to pedestrians, end quote. Probably should be access for or by pedestrians. Now, could I have slide 2 up now, please? The pathway design standard seems to indicate that the entire path area will be surfaced with asphalt or stone dust. The diagram seems to include lawns and trees, etc. It's a simple wording problem, but it needs to be fixed. The pathway and a pathway area, unfortunately, are using the same word here, and English, it's tough. 9.4.16.3g. The wording indicates the positive impact must be on all of municipal services, tax base, and employment. It's hard to imagine doing all those together with one thing, maybe or. Okay, those are the errors that I think affect enforceability. Now, since I still have time left, yes, I'm going to go on to errors affecting meaning. In the document, PS is an acronym that's used in Table 5, but it's not defined anywhere. The acronym POS is defined, but it's never used. The acronym BTZ is defined for Build to Zone, which occurs in a lot of places. Unfortunately, a lot of what actually occurs is B-T-Z or B.T.Z. Also, the word facade, F-A-C with a cedilla, A-D-E, is not English. That's the French spelling of a very similar word that we stole. It occurs 40 times spelled that way in the document. My spell checker flags it. Somebody could have fixed it. 9.4.15.3, so vibrancy. Okay, I love the idea, but I'm not sure it's definable in a zoning bylaw. Walkability, same thing, not sure. I want to go in front of a judge and explain whether I have walkability or not. Okay, on to the map. Why doesn't the northeast upper border align with the street property lines like the rest of the map? It doesn't have to, it's just a question. Does the buffer zone only apply to the north edge? Is it the scale in the map? I guess I'll leave that one out. The Town Commons Washington Street site is marked as commercial frontage, but also about the buffer zone, 9.4.6.2.8 is may include, but that means anything or nothing is allowed. I'm pretty sure the intent is that the buffer zone can look like the example or not, but I actually think the wording is interpretable as you could just ignore it and not put in a buffer zone. I'd have used the word shall. Could I show slide 3, please? Side setback doesn't correspond to any arrows. I don't think the red area are the side setback arrows. Maybe I'm wrong, but I thought it was the other part between those red arrows and the lot width. Okay. B.T.Z is undefined. Probably should be BTZ. I think we went through that before. Okay. 9.4.7.6, clear sight distance. There's not actually a definition. And street ROW is not defined, but street R period O period W period in the diagram is defined. Okay. 9.4.7.10.c. Does facade transparency apply to corner lot outdoor amenity facade, the diagonal part? Just fix the wording. Table 1A to D. Parking setback could be included in some of the setback explanatory diagrams, but it's not in any of them. Could you show slide 4, please? Table 1B has the attached photo to the right. It doesn't have a label, but it looks to me like it has 10 or 12 units across without a break, exceeding the 8-unit maximum. Does the photo supersede the text? Would some lawyer or judge decide that maybe it does? It shouldn't, of course, but again. 9.4.9.3. Does this supersede section 5.5 in all cases, or only inside the MOUD? 9.4.10.1c says, quote, should follow, end quote. I'd have preferred, quote, shall follow preservation guidelines to make it that you have to, without a waiver. 9.4.3.10.3c, quote, will increase in-housing choices, just wrong grammar. 9.4.12, table 3, ANS doesn't seem to be defined. 9.4.12.2.b.5, buildings or developments that certified by the Green Building Council. Probably the word "are" is missing, but the sentence doesn't really work.
Mr. Shea, you have a minute left.
Thank you. All right. I think, you know what? Oh, the last sort of important one. POS 9.415.2.c, POS isn't used anywhere. Table 5.1, OPS is not defined. PS is not defined. 9.415, Table 5.7 design standard says forecourt shall, should be courtyard shall, because it's in the courtyard description. I didn't like that there were no fences on the rooftop gardens. I don't think that makes us liable, but you never know, and I had a terrible experience once when I was at a place like that. And 9.4.16 is, quote, an urban design waiver and special permit, end quote, one thing or two things, and when did we become an urban area? I have some more typos, some more ambiguous stuff and word choices, but if I haven't convinced you there's a problem by now, well, fine. So I'm going to vote against this because of its unclarity. I'm really in favor of doing this. Cleaned up, I mostly agree with what it wants to do. We really need it, but it needs to be cleaned up before we take responsibility for it. Thank you for listening, and I apologize for how boring this presentation is.
Thank you, Mr. Shea. Next, Judith Howard. And Ms. Howard has a motion to amend. And I just ask counsel, in terms of procedure, when a registered speaker has a motion to amend, do we take up the amendment or do we finish the registered speakers before addressing the amendment?
Mr. Moderator, I believe it's at the discretion of the meeting moderator to determine that. Custom and practice would have it that the registered speakers would speak first. Thanks.
That's what I thought. I just want to make sure. Thank you. Ms. Howard, I have a motion to amend from Ms. Howard, seconded by Ms. Eske. Would you like me to read the motion, Ms. Howard?
Probably after.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Judith Howard, District 3. Mr. Moderator, I speak slowly, so may I have an extension of 10 minutes?
An additional 10 minutes? Or a
I
total,
won't take-
or a total of 10 minutes?
12 or something like that.
Just whatever, tell us what you'd like to have, what you're
All right,
requesting.
12 minutes, I should get through everything.
A total of 12 minutes, so an extension of 7 minutes?
Thank
All right.
you.
Is there a motion to that effect?
Thank you so
Is that
much.
motion seconded? All those in favor of that motion? All those opposed? Thank you, Ms. Howard, you can proceed.
Thank you so much, Judith Howard, District 3. At one time, Norwood was called the crown jewel of the Commonwealth. The reasons why are its industrial past, with the internationally known Norwood Press, Plimpton Press, and the Tannery, along with the distinct characteristics of its beautiful and stately mansions and homes throughout the town, and the diversity of its neighborhoods, like Dublin, Hardscrabble, Moss Hill, Germantown, Swedeville, Christian Hill, and President's Hill. Two key landmarks most significant to Norwood stood up. Town Hall, of course, with its Gothic tower, Carillon Tower, one of the few in New England, and the original majestic Norwood Senior High School, which was pictured in Parade magazine on September 28, 2008, as to what the ideal high school in America should look like. Both architectural treasures were designed by William G. Upham, Norwood native and Harvard graduate, who also designed the gateway to Norwood Center, including the Norwood Post Office, the Norwood Theater, the Callahan Building, where Conrad's is now, the Masonic Temple on Day Street, the Oddfellows Building at the corner of Washington and Vernon Streets. He designed what is now the Guild Medical Building and buildings at Phillips Exeter Academy, Dartmouth College, Wareham Town Hall, and Harkness Tower at Yale University, which houses their Carillon. He is recognized by architectural historians all over New England for the genius he was and his designs. We here in Norwood see his magnificent works, but unfortunately lost an important one, the original high school. Norwood is different from nearby towns. It is highest in population and smallest in size. It is only 10.6 square miles, and its main corridor is Washington Street that stretches from Westwood to Walpole, running through a once vibrant downtown Norwood Center. Before everyone had a car, residents would walk to the library, then walk uptown to shop in stores, then walk home. But hardly anyone does that anymore, and downtown has lost its energy and vibrancy. So how do we get it back and get the desired effect we want? Everyone knows and agrees something has to be done. But is the mixed-use overlay district plan as written and presented to you this evening the tool needed for downtown Norwood Center to return to glory? This plan is too extensive with extremely high buildings and a greater density for even more housing and services than this town, police, fire, and schools can take. It also would mar the visual continuity and landscape of the town square and diminish and dwarf the importance of Norwood Town Hall, the Norwood Theater, St. Catherine's, and United Church of Christ, the pillars of our downtown center community. So what to do? For much too long, owners in Norwood Center have done little to beautify and update their buildings. God bless you. They must step up to the plate and renovate. While some facades are beautiful, they look tired. And in order to invite residents and others into our community, giving the buildings a facelift would be a tremendous start. To increase activity, much better lighting is needed as downtown is too dark. Audio and visually timed traffic lights, wider and better crosswalks. Electrical boxes should go behind the buildings on Washington Street, not on the main sidewalk. Wide sidewalks and not use bricks, but high-quality cement that's not watered down, and granite curbing. Allow outdoor seating for cafes. Perhaps Norwood could be a mecca for restaurants. Before going to the Norwood Theater, patrons could dine out. Straighten the jet-outs to allow for additional parking. Strategic handicap parking, benches to sit on. Completely redo, repair, and restripe the several downtown parking lots and allow wider spaces for SUVs. Also essential is to include landscaping in the parking lots. Please do not wait another year, and do hire a landscape architect for the townwide facilities department. And flowers, flowers everywhere. Doesn't this look like Perks? Actually, it's in historic Madison, Indiana. If one has read Article 5, the height of buildings indicates 45 feet and includes up to 4 stories. Even with setbacks, that is much too much for the central business district to handle. The height should not exceed any existing building on Washington Street, and it should be 3 stories, which is more or less than 40 feet. Density, 24 apartment units by right, but the planning board at a recent meeting increased the density to 32 apartment units by special permit. That request hopefully would not be rubber stamped. If you want to see what density looks like, do take a look at Avalon and the 4-story apartment building over 60 feet high at Guild and Lenox Streets and Plimpton Avenue. Look at how close it is to residents' homes. They could never sell their homes. Other communities have repurposed their commercial buildings, once used for manufacturing, but Norwood permitted Plimpton Press to be demolished and replaced with a Chapter B 198 apartment unit complex with Regal right across the street with 40 more. That totals 138. The planning board addressed millennials with this project, but really they don't stay in any one place for long. On page 21, there is a list of waivers entitled Urban Design Waivers and Special Permits. Please note, urban, not suburban. The letter H reads, and I'm quoting, "Such relief shall not result in substantial detriment to the MUOD or the neighborhood." But with Avalon, there already is substantial detriment to the Plimpton neighborhood. When I inquired what does substantial mean, the reply was it was standard. What? There should not be any detriment to any neighborhood. The Plimpton Press so-called Chapter 40B affordable housing complex is the reason why it is necessary that the height and density of this mixed-use overlay district be reduced and tandem parking be eliminated. By the way, many buildings in South Norwood were ahead of its time, as they were built around 1918 and already have had mixed use for 100 years, with retail on the first floor and residential 2 floors above. Town officials are supposed to be the guardians and caretakers of the town, its residents and businesses. The height, density, tandem parking, and particularly number H, the waiver specified in this plan, should be unacceptable to all town meeting members who are representing their districts. Norwood should not be a cookie-cutter town. We can do better. We want to keep the flavor of our historic downtown Norwood, but with some major updates. After all, we are Norwood, and that is why we choose to live here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. Are you moving your amendment now?
Yes, that would be fine.
And that has been seconded.
Yes.
And the motion to amend, and I'll read it out now. We'll hear the other registered speakers, and then we'll come back to this amendment, and I'll come back to this to remind you at that
Thank you,
point.
Mr. Moderator.
The motion to amend is that the height of the mixed-use overlay district in the central business district in the town of Norwood shall not exceed the height of any existing building on Washington Street, which is more or less 40 feet and 3 stories, and that the density shall not exceed 16/24 housing units per acre of land, with no special permits allowed pertaining to height and density. Tandem parking shall be eliminated. Section 2, such relief of an urban design waiver and special permit shall not result in any detriment to the mixed-use overlay district or surrounding neighborhood. Thank you. Our next registered speaker is Mr. Mulvihill.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks for letting me speak tonight, Mr. Moderator. Packy Mulvihill, the current chairman of the Zoning Board of Appeals. The reason I stand here this evening is to rise in support of this article after it was presented to the board in numerous meetings, and deliberate thought was given to this by the planning board and the planner, Mr. Halkiotis, through the consultant. I'm sorry, I forgot your name. I know it was Ted, though. Ted, yeah. The genesis of why we're here is going to be repetitive for the selectmen and some of the other folks that were at the original meeting with the Board of Selectmen, but it started actually in the 90s. Mr. Plasko will speak to this. We tried to do this, and we just missed, when I was a member of this body for 20 years, we just missed by about 11 or 10 votes, Billy will tell you, where we tried to do something very similar that was proposed this evening. But in 2013, the ZBA was approached with an article by a developer that owns the building on the corner of Cottage and Washington Street. It's a cafe on the Common. It's now Charles Barber Shop, and something else is in there. He proposed to knock it down, rebuild the building, and put the residences above the building. I think it was 5 or 6 units, with the storefront still there. To a person, the board that I sat on at the time, and Chairman Riley eloquently wrote the planning board, to a person, we wanted to say yes to that type of development. We were all in agreement that that was something that the town could really use. It was a new structure, it was a new look, but our zoning book, right, wrong, or indifferent, is very tight, and it did not allow it. There was no leeway for us to do that, although some lawyers will try and finagle it, but the law was crystal clear. The lot area wasn't met, didn't have any parking, and it failed, unfortunately. Fast forward to 2018, another development that actually we did approve through a special permitting process was originally applied for under a variance process, and those were the condominiums behind this, the White Hen, which is now Seven Hens, or it's right across the street from Garino's Bakery. It's the old sandstone property. And again, another reuse, tear down of an older structure, and with all due deference to my good friend Judith Howard, some of these properties are beyond salvageable. And this particular one, the sandstone property, whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, the landlord did not maintain it. It was blighted. It was a scene of numerous police phone calls, and it was begging for a change. The original application was not something that we could approve through a variance request. Thus, another letter to the planning board where we asked them for some mechanism that we could go through this body, through the selectmen and all the appropriate boards, to say yes to that type of development. Because again, it was something that I'll harken on again repetitively, and I'm sorry if I'm repetitious, but I'm 53 years old, and the downtown of our town looks the same almost as it did when I was a kid, being dragged down the sidewalk with my mother to the sidewalk sales at Park Snows, at Klein's, at Cummings, at Murray's Outlet, and then we'd have lunch at Liggett's, and it goes on ad infinitum. It looks the same when other communities to our left and our right are absolutely zooming by us. And this building is another piece of the puzzle that we're in right now. The Norwood High School that I graduated from was an older structure that couldn't be remodeled, or it could have, but it wasn't appropriate cost-wise. We spent the money and we stepped into the new millennium. I'm asking you to support this article to do the same in our town center, which is our aortic artery right through the heart of our community. There's a number of avenues that we could pursue. This particular article was something that, again, we wanted more towards Article 6, which is the next article up, which is the footnote, the density issue. But when Mr. Halkiotis and the planning board came forward with this, the ZBA looked at it long and hard. There was some questions and concerns, but ultimately we rallied behind it. Because again, I just can't look at this community and say, hey, listen, with all these new faces and all these new families that have stepped up to the plate, participating in this form of government, saying yes to this building, which was a huge number, and now we've got our center, which is the face of our community, that looks like 1945, with all due respect, but it does not look like the face of what I think our town is heading in, and the way I think our town should be voting in and moving forward in. So I rise in favor of it, and I ask you to consider this. It's something that, it's a lot of concerns with some of the previous speakers, We could talk this thing to death. I've been on numerous committees in the past. We've had numerous plans and downtown steering committees and
Mr. Bergeron, you've got 1 minute.
Okay. Angled traffic. I don't have any slides, moderator, so.
Doesn't give you more time.
Exactly. And I don't need an extension, so. But we could talk this thing to death, and we'll get nowhere. We've got a great article in front of us. Again, may not be perfect to a lot of people, and I respect your opinion, but it's in front of us right now. Let's work with it. Let's step into the next chapter of this town and put a new face on our community, because I can tell you there's developers in the offing right now that are watching this, that are ready to move. I represent one that has two pieces of a three-pronged puzzle that is ready to move forward quickly if this article moves forward. I thank you, and I hope you'll support this article. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bovio. Mr. Bergeron.
Michael Bergeron, District 1. Patrick mentioned many of the things that I was going to say, so my presentation will be brief. I am very excited about this proposal. We may be able to tweak certain things, but we have been left behind by the towns around us, and there are developers out there that are just waiting to spend some money in this town, and I think the end result will be, over time, it won't happen overnight, but over time it will pay off for all of us. If you look around at, in particular, I look at Dedham, and I see the new buildings that are going up there. They're tastefully done, commercial on the ground floor, apartments above, and I think we can do that here in Norwood. And I think, yes, you can point out certain things in this plan that perhaps we can tweak a little bit, but we don't want to turn our backs on the opportunities before us this evening. And Patrick said it very clearly when he said, this town, I moved here 45 years ago, and the downtown looks precisely the same to me as it did then, except that we have many more vacancies. And I think the cure is to move forward with this project. It's a very thoughtful project. I like the way it's done, and I also want to draw attention to one point in this. We have a problem with we did have a problem with 40B, and we have developments, and pointed out the large building 60 feet high on Plimpton Avenue. And this project calls for, if you look at 9.413, you'll see the affordability where as you add units, rental units and ownership units, they provide for a certain percentage of these, 15 on the rental and 20 on the ownership units, would have to be affordable, which will protect us as some of the other restricted use units in town go offline. So that will protect us on the 40B issue in the future. The only difference I would make in terms of tweak, it talks for projects greater than 8 residential units. I'd probably make it 10 because I could do the math. The math is easier. But there are certain, I have a hard time figuring out 15% of 8. But I would say this, yes, we can tweak this plan, but we should not turn our backs on it. I think the planning board, and in particular the planning department, has done an excellent job here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bergeron. Mr. Hajjab.
David Hajar, District 4. So, Pac, you did a great job. I remember going to Murray's myself as a kid, so, you know. 3 years ago, we started talking about future planning. What do we want this town to look like 1 year, 5 years, 15 years from now? And I think we can't mix a 40B issue with what we're trying to do downtown. We had no control over the 40B. That was in the state's hands. But we do have control over this. This is managed growth. This is what you want your town officials to do, to spend the time to detail out what we want it to look like. And they've done a very good job. I agree with Mike and Packy. Is it perfect? No, but I don't think any document put forward to us is going to meet everybody's exactness. but we have to continue to move forward. We can't be standing still. You don't want change? Then we're going to have continued vacancies, continued pizza parlors, continued nail salons, and while I can appreciate all those businesses coming to Norwood, just the same ones over and over again, and they recycle themselves because since we have so many, they don't stay here that long, and they move out, we end up with more vacancies. This addresses developers who want to put money into this town. We're not giving up anything. We're not giving up our character. We're offering the ability of owners to invest money, and in return, they get something. And that's the reason why they're not doing it today. There's nothing in it for them to make money on the investment that we want them to make in a piece of property. They're not going to do it on their own and say, oh, let's just ask them to spend $10 million on a piece of property and invest it. That doesn't happen. They need a return. But what's good about this document is that it provides the details that we need and want to manage that growth. And it's going to increase the commercial tax base of this town, which helps every single resident going forward. We need that. We want that. So let's not get discouraged or poo-poo people coming forward, especially these town officials. The planning board has done an excellent job. The consultant has done an excellent job. Are there issues that they maybe have to resolve later down about definitions? I don't know. And quite frankly, Mr. Moderator, I hope they're given an opportunity to answer some of the questions that Mr. Shea raised. Some of them were facts that he was pointing out, but some of them he also raised questions, and I think he should be allowed to provide answers.
I assume they'll make that offer.
Good, good. So I urge support of this. We need a vibrant downtown. So you said once vibrant, it's not going to become vibrant unless you do something about it. And they spent a long time and money looking at what's going around us. And Norwood, again, is coming late to the dance. And while other towns have really moved forward and done it tastefully, now we finally have something in front of us. And let's not just throw it aside. Let's move forward. It is very well documented on how we want to protect our buildings and the design of them with some really nice standards. We're not just throwing up or asking them to throw up aluminum siding and keep us into the 60s. So please, I urge, let's move forward and vote yes.
Thank you, Mr. John. Mr. Brody.
Steve Brody, District 4. Yes, I have some questions that can probably be answered later. Now, if everyone has copies of the bylaw, page 6. Paragraph 9.4.7. The building lots. It says the building lot requirements designate the minimum area TA given building. Can the planning board or someone answer that later on?
Well, we can answer it now. We have them right
Okay.
here. If
What is meant by that
somebody from the planning board want
sentence?
to address that?
Okay, what is meant by that sentence, please?
Mr. Moderator, Paul Halkiotis, Planning and Economic Development Director. Section 9.4.7, General Design Standards, states, number 1, building lots. Building lot requirements designate the minimum area TA given building or development site can be built on in the MUOD. I think that's a typo, and we would propose to amend that. That is intended to say minimum area to a given building. There's an O missing after the T, and that word should be to state area to a given building.
It's that.
That a given area.
That area.
That a given area, not two.
I'm sorry. I think we're agreed to typo and we're disagreed on what the correct version is. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's supposed to say that a given building or development site. If a town meeting member could offer a motion to amend this section to correct that.
We have a motion to amend pending, so I think we need to deal with the pending motion to amend, and then we can come back and deal with this motion to amend.
Okay.
Mr. Brody?
Yes, now, page 9, please. Paragraph 9.4.8. Let's go with the third line down, where it says identified in the table below. I think you mean plural, because there are many tables. I think you mean to say identified in the tables below.
Yes, Ms. Howard.
I would like to know if there is a procedure that once we vote on something, if the boards or the people in charge of whatever is put before us have the ability to critique, correct mistakes such as typos. Is there something that instead of us sitting here all night long doing this?
I'm going to ask council's advice on that.
Mr. Moderator, members of the body, it is not uncommon for a lengthy, complex piece of legislation to have language errors, Scribner's errors as they're called. They can be corrected so long as the intent of the legislation remains intact.
And I think at this point, Mr. Brody, the two items you've raised are clearly typos. I think there's no doubt as to the intent, so I don't think we need to amend.
Okay. Okay, now I have page 10. It'll be table 1B. Go down halfway through the page. 1.4, additional standards. Then A. Now, what is meant by a rear-loaded vehicle, please?
The phrase rear-loaded vehicle access is required. That's your question?
Yes.
So a rear-loaded vehicle access requirement means that these are townhouses. So these are single-family houses that are attached horizontally with a common wall. It means that you can't park in front of the townhouse or on the side of the townhouse, but you have to have access behind it, either on your lot to the rear or to a common garage somewhere that's loaded off of a rear access road or an alley. So there's no parking in the front, there's no parking inside. The parking has to be located behind the units.
Well, then if we're going to amend it, then I'd recommend that it be said simply like you said and not use the term rear-loaded, please.
All right,
Okay.
anything else, Mr. Brody?
Yes.
And I'll tell you, you have a minute left, so.
Okay, page 18. and I think this might follow what Mr. Shea found, that yes, you do designate CS civic space in the POPS, the publicly oriented private space, and then B, POS, private open space. But in the tables, if you look at Table 5, Type 1, refer to OPS, but OPS isn't defined in paragraph 2 up above.
I'll ask the planning board, is OPS a mistype for POS? Yes, Ms. Holgram.
We have two of these going, so we don't know who.
You could speak of that.
He's got what I got, OPS, it's probably supposed to be POS. That's what he's asking.
Now, let's give the planning board a chance to answer.
Just point of information is that somehow this must be a corrected version, because all that they're raising are addressed in here. The correction that he just talked about, the POPs, I'm sorry.
Mr. Hajar, you're saying there are two different versions. I will tell you, the version that was given to town meeting members, which is what I'm looking at, has the typos that Mr. Brody is referencing. So if there's a later version that corrected those typos, I don't think it was made available to town meeting members. Does anyone know if there is a different version than the one that was mailed to town meeting members?
There has to be.
Okay. And does anyone know the differences between what was sent to town meeting members and what evidently the various boards are holding?
Some of the edits that were mentioned.
Speaking to the,
You can take.
Again, there seems to be two versions.
wait a minute.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yep. So there seems to be two versions of this bylaw. There's one that has addressed some of the edits that people have recommended or pointed out tonight, including the version that I have, and then there's one that you have and probably many others in the room have, which does not have the corrected edits. POPS.
Mr. Hearns always does this to me.
Okay, is there any chance that we as town meeting members, everyone, we can get the corrected, up-to-date version, please?
I'm assuming that they don't have sufficient copies to give out this evening. Is that correct?
No, we don't have additional copies. I don't understand why there's two versions. The version that I'm looking at doesn't have the first typo that he mentioned, and so that's why I couldn't understand what was going on. So there were multiple versions of this as we kept editing it, and apparently there was a mix-up. I apologize.
Let me ask, and I think I'm going to look for some guidance here from Mr. Hearn, even though he is not moderating here. But one approach to this would be to stay this item. It appears we're not going to get done this evening. We're going to be back here for a further meeting, and we can, at that point, all work from the same draft, since we don't know, or town meeting members don't necessarily know that the changes are just, typographical errors. And it just seems to me that the body ought to be voting on the document that's actually going to be approved. And does that make sense to you, Mr. Hearn, just as a matter of practice? You have any suggestions? Yeah, yes, please.
Mr. Moderator, I wonder, from the point of view of, and I'm sorry to put you in this position, but you're right.
You're not really.
I did. It may make sense, since we're not likely to finish all the business of the meeting tonight at the pace we're moving, it might make sense if, as you say, we stay or somehow or other back out of this for the time being to allow the planning board to come up with sufficient copies, and that could perhaps be made available on the town's website in some convenient place. Council has already advised the body that so long as the intent of what the body votes on is met by corrections, I would think also that a motion by the planning board with a revised version, so long as it does not stray from the intent set forth in the warrant, would be appropriate, so the body would know that they're voting on something where as many as possible of the typos could be cleaned up. And that may be an approach that I would take if I were in your position. Just a suggestion, as my mother used to say.
I appreciate it, and that's why I asked. I'm comfortable that if we have a cleaned up version of this presented to it at our next session that falls within the warrant, it's not a change of what was announced as the warrant. I'm concerned because sometimes one person's typographical error is another person's substantive error, and it seems to me we ought to give everybody a chance to satisfy themselves that what's being presented as typos are typos. And so, Mr. Hearn, you have another suggestion?
2 points, Mr. Moderator. I wonder if a redlined version could be made available to point out
you
the
took the words out of my
changes.
mouth.
And the second point is that means you have to show up Monday night.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
So, Mr. McFarland.
Peter McFarland, District 3. Motion to adjourn till Monday night.
Motion to adjourn or motion to continue this consideration of this matter until Monday? We can still keep going forward on the next motions. There's no need to adjourn the entire matter.
Motion to table
this motion.
Article 5.
All right, there's a motion.
Until Monday.
There's a motion to table Article 5 until Monday. Is that seconded? That is seconded. Is that a motion that requires debate? It does, all right. Ms. Haley.
I would ask that Mr. Shea show the planning board his copy of the things that he thought were errors or misprints before they continue to fix what we have in front of us.
Any further discussions on the motion to stay? Yes. Ms. Donnelly. I'm sorry, Ms. Donnelly.
That's okay, Jean. Helen Donahue, District 6. Could we please go back to the plan that shows the proposed zoning change, the overlay? There's a very big error on that plan, I believe, that we have to address.
Is this on the motion to table? We can.
But this is important about, Mrs. Haley was allowed to bring up an error. It's the town square and the town hall are designated with a red line for business. At the original hearing, a motion hearing, I brought it up that they have to take the red line away from the town square and the town hall so we won't have business use in the future for those parcels. That has to be removed by Monday also.
The matter before the board now is whether to table this matter till Monday. If it's tabled, you can certainly either raise that on Monday or raise that with the planning board before Monday.
If we're going to get this straightened out by Monday, it would be good to get it in by Monday so we can move along.
I agree. Any further discussion on the motion to table? Ms. Noem. Wait, look at the mic. What? No, please. We're getting a mic from Ms. Nomi. The council tells me it is. Can we get a mic to Ms. Nomi? Right there, or right there? Yeah.
Sorry about that. Kelly Newby, District 6. My assumption was Article 6 was related to Article 5, so I thought that we should table both of them if we're not going to vote on Article 5, as they're both related
They're not,
to...
they're not related in the sense that changes to the Article 5 language will not change Article 6.
Okay.
They're separate. Any further discussions on the motion to table? Yes, now.
Point of information. What we get back will be mostly typos. Is that my understanding, and am I correct with that? It's not going to actually change the article. You're going to correct typos, and that's it?
Mr. Moderator. We will, there were multiple versions of this bylaw as we went through various edits. And the correct version did not make it into the warrant. One of the typos that was first identified was correct in mine, and that's why I couldn't figure out what was going on. We will place a copy of the correct version on the town's website. We will make multiple copies available at the planning and the town clerk's office so that folks can pick those up and look at those over the weekend and be able to read the final correct version. We apologize for all of this confusion. So we will make those copies available, both electronically and hard copies, available in the planning and the town clerk's office.
And that will include a red line copy so that people can see what the changes are?
Yeah, well, I have the final version, and I don't have all of the corrections or questions that have been raised tonight. And so I don't know if I'm going to be able to go back and identify where there was a mistake that was corrected a couple of weeks ago. So we will have a version that we'll ask town meeting members to vote on.
Thank you. That answers my questions. It's not going to be just typos. I got to go back and study all over again. Thank you.
Any further discussion, Ms. Holgram, on the motion to table? Yes, Ms. Holgram. Yes, that's the motion before the board. Motion to table.
I do? Okay.
Okay, cut me off. Debbie Homewood, District 3. Again, in order to table it, everybody's worked long and hard. We've had tons of meetings. We'd love your input. And everybody makes good points. We're all not going to love the end product. But I would encourage anybody that wants to put some stuff in, and we'll get the right one, to call the planning board. We've had, 10 meetings on this? And asked for everybody's help, and there's invaluable help out here. We'd love your help. To the point of, I don't love everything in this article, but in 1990, we didn't plan. We just said, let's do an overlay district.
Ms. Holgram, we're on the motion to table now.
Okay. So we're going to table it and have more discussion on Monday?
That's the motion.
Okay. Okay, everybody's waving their hand.
All right.
Done.
Yes, ma'am.
Donna Montgomery, District 6. If we table this, this also will table Judith's amendment?
Yes. The question was, if we table this, will that also table the amendment? And the answer is yes. So that will be, we will take up where we left off. Yes, in the back, right there. All right. The motion has been moved and seconded. All those in favor of tabling Article 5 until the next session of town meeting, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. All right, the motion has been tabled. We move on to Article 6. Article 6 is a motion of the Planning Board. We have the motion, Mr. Peczkowski?
There we go. Article 6, recommended by the Planning Board. Voted that the town amend zoning bylaw, section 4.1.2.2, by deleting the present version of section 4.1.2.2 and substituting, therefore, the following new section 4.1.2.2. For multifamily dwellings, the permanent maximum density is as follows. It's by district. We have a recommendation, Mr. Moderator, on Article 6, Dimensional Requirements, Amendment to footnote 2. The Planning Board held a public hearing on March 26, 2019 to accept public comments on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. Approximately 7 people attended the public hearing. 3 people commented on the article, neither for or opposed. The Planning Board voted unanimously 5-0 to recommend approval of the article. Mr. Moderator, Mr. Halkiotis will explain the article.
Thank you. Mr. Halkiotis?
Thank you. Article 6 proposes to amend Section 4.1.2 of the zoning bylaw, the notes to the table of dimensional requirements. Currently, the density requirements are not compatible with most of the multifamily housing projects. Numerous multifamily projects have needed to seek variances from the zoning board or as a result of footnote 2, which places tight restrictions on density. While we're conscious of concerns regarding density, the current zoning in our commercial zoning district only allows 11 dwelling units per acre. Redevelopment of many dilapidated properties has not occurred because of this density restriction, because it will not provide property owners with a return on their investment to rebuild under the current density restriction of 11 units per acre. Footnote 2 affects the following commercial zoning districts. A, the multifamily district, central business district, highway business district, limited business district, and the general business district. The proposed amendment is presented here in the table below. This would increase the allowed number of dwelling units per acre from 11 to 16. This will provide the Zoning Board of Appeals with more flexibility in considering special permits on variance applications and multifamily housing applications. It does not outright turn away quality redevelopment projects as the current regulations do. It provides a legitimate density cap that will protect the town from overly dense multifamily projects. This article came about at the request of the Board of Appeals. They have had several applications over the last 10 years where the property owners came forward and proposed to do quality redevelopment projects of older, dilapidated buildings. They were not able to grant the variances that were requested because of this density cap that exists in footnote 2. And so at the request of the Board of Appeals, the Planning Board agreed that the density should be increased. And this, similar to Article 5, does allow for greater density. It increases it from what's restrictive now at 11 units per acre, but will increase that to a modest number of 16 dwelling units per acre. The Planning Board unanimously supports this article. The Board of Appeals unanimously supports this article, and we recommend that you vote to support it as well.
Thank you. We have Mr. Mulvihill scheduled speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I'll be very quick, folks. This was actually what we were looking for when we wrote the letter. And then, like I said to you, the grander proposal was born, and we got behind it. But this was exactly what we were looking for in the sense that when the applicants were coming in under the variance criteria, it's so restrictive that we were just hamstrung. We'd had to say no to them because of the density requirements, the lot size. The original footnote was 10,000 square feet and then 3,500 square feet of land per every other unit. And it was just, it was a non-starter. So Mr. Riley at the time drafted the letter, was the chairman, drafted the letter to the planning board asking them to give us some sort of leeway or some sort of flexibility within the zoning or creating a new bylaw that would let us go about maybe in a special permit capacity that gives us upon our quote-unquote determination type of language. And I think this is a decent fit, and it should allow some owners, not all, but some, to maybe look at their properties a little differently. I should also say that, you know, when you say housing and you say apartments, that's kryptonite to a lot of people here in the town, present company included. I'm always looking for more ownership situations when an applicant comes forward, although that's a very sticky legal situation, and Councilor DeLuca and Mr. Halkiotis have advised us to be very careful when we're doing that, because we can't zone ownership or rental situations to a degree. But this article is something that we felt strongly about, and this was actually the one that started the whole ball rolling. But Article 5 is the one that I think we should really support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Hall.
John Hall, District 6. Because the issues in this article are inextricably tied up with the issues in Article 5, I move that we table this until Monday.
All right. Any discussion on Mr. Hall's motion to table until Monday? Mr. Pachakowski.
Article 5 is an overlay district. Okay, and so there is an underlying district uptown. I don't know, Sue, if you could throw that slide up there if you have it handy, that one of the yellow shows up the Central Business District. The Central Business District is there currently. Anything that is the overlay district basically sits on top of it. The overlay district has its own set of bylaws. Okay, so I don't see how the two are really tied together. To follow Packy and what he said is, I want people to understand that this word density, and people get nervous about it. If you have a 12,000 or 11,000 square foot lot, that's a quarter of an acre, that's 4 dwelling units. But to get back to the motion, the overlay district has its own separate, we have a lot of overlay districts in this town. They all have their own set of bylaws which control that. We are talking about the Central Business District, which is the underlying zone here. Okay, nothing to do with the overlay, the underlying zone and other districts in the town. So I don't believe that the two are related.
Discussion on the, yes, Ms. Haley.
About this. I would like to table this because under number 2 in Article 6 in the white pages, there is a reference to Central Business District. So I think that there is, no offense, some tie-in here. So I think that we should table it.
Donnelly.
Thank you. Helen Donahue, District 6. This proposed article that we're concentrating on now applies to the entire town, not just the Central Business District. And when this proposed overlay district was brought up at one of the informational hearings, it was suggested that we use this approach rather than another overlay district. This approach, we have an excellent zoning bylaw in existence now, and this type of change for a particular part.
Ms. Donahue, this is on the motion to table.
That's right. So I see, Mr. Moderator, I'd like a chance to have, I'm talking about what's proposed, and I'd like to just have a chance to finish.
Well, but the motion that we're considering right now, you will have a chance to discuss this motion when we consider it. Right now, the question is, do we table it or not?
The reason that I'm talking about it is to say that I don't think that we should table it because it's a separate issue. And this issue applies to the entire town. I'm speaking in opposition to tabling it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further Yes,
Jean Taylor, District 8. Ernie Patrickowski, I agree with you. Could we put that down, please? We don't always agree on things. Sorry, Ernie. It does cover the whole town, and if I may, through you, Mr. Chairman, I think, Packy, one of the things that I watched, and a lot of times I watch them with their hands tied, one of these was Sansone's property. Is that one of the ones you were referring to, Packy? Where is he? Did you leave? Okay. That was difficult watching that, because that's, to me, was a blighted area. So I don't think that this should be tabled. I won't go on, because I know that that's what's on the table. I don't think it should be tabled. I think we should act on it.
Any further comment on the motion to table? All right, we'll move the motion to table Article 6 until the next session of this meeting. All those in favor of tabling Article 6, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. No. Can I have a show of hands? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. All right, the motion fails. So move back to consideration of the motion of Article 6. Any further discussion on Article 6? Yes, sir.
I'm a little confused
If you could
because
just introduce yourself,
Oh, I'm
sir.
sorry.
Yeah.
Chuck Burgess, District 4. I'm a little confused because we have the chart of the proposed change, and we only saw briefly what it is at current. Could I have the, is it possible to have the current chart showing the way it is now next to that? And the other, there's two parts, please,
Why don't we do
Mr.
that one?
Moderator?
Let's do that one first. Can you
Okay,
get
thank
that up,
you.
Mr. Helios?
We don't have the existing zoning chart as part of this presentation. What I can tell you is that I can tell you what footnote 2 said, but I don't have the old chart. We have what we're proposing to change.
Well, it seems that the town meeting members should be able to compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges, and it'd be very helpful if we saw what exists now and what the proposed change is. And unfortunately, for the last hour or so, we've seen an awful lot of confusion, and I know people have done an awful lot of work, and it's very difficult, you know, to see it kind of degenerate to that. You also mentioned that this would change it from 11, was it 11 units to 16? That was another statistic
Yes.
we don't have on here, but it came up on our slide.
Yes, this proposal simply stated changes what's allowed in the commercial zoning districts in terms of density from 11 dwelling units, which could be condominiums or apartments per acre, to 16.
Would it be possible to find out how that new number compares with surrounding communities?
Yes.
Can you tell us?
Well, yes, it would be possible to do that, but I don't have the zoning bylaws from our neighboring communities in my head right now. I apologize.
Well, again, that's the kind of information that would help town meeting make a more informed decision. It seems sometimes we're expected to just rubber stamp a lot of things, and I think it'd be important to know what direction we're going into. Are we getting more dense, more congested, or are we taking steps to eventually moderate or ameliorate those situations of density? Because density, as was pointed out, it's a very confusing word. Depends on where you're looking. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Shea.
Richard Shea, is this on? Richard Shea, District 1. Surprisingly, I'm speaking in favor of this article. During my recent research, I discovered that 16 dwelling units per acre is not very dense at all. And honestly, if we'd seen some pictures, you'd see that was what was presented in various urban and suburban development websites that I looked at. And 16 dwelling units per acre is actually the lower level. It's considered not dense at all. I mean, The diagram says not dense. So I know it's kind of a subjective thing, but I think we should set it at that. And it doesn't conflict with Article 5 because that's the minimum dwelling unit, or DU, if that's what that means, per acre that's described in any of that document. So that's my opinion after looking into it a little bit. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Shea. Any further discussion? Yes, Ms. Easy.
Hi, Tony Esco, District 5. I just wanted to get something clarified for a minute, just for a little comparison, because in Article 6, we go from about 11 to 16 units per acre. And I'm not really talking about Article 5, but I need to refer just for comparison. Originally, Article 5 had a residential density of 16 units and then 24 if there was a betterment. So I saw that as a compatibility in densities, that Article 6 was recommending 16, and so did Article 5. But then the changes tonight for Article 5 increased the density from the 1624 to a 2032. So I guess I'm asking in Article 6, why is 16 good enough in Article 6, but Article 5 you wanted to make the change to 20? So before they were compatible to me, you understand, like Article 5 and 6 for the density on housing were compatible, except that Article 5 allowed the betterment to go from 16 to 24. So I'm just wondering if we're creating a disparity that's going to be a problem, or that somebody's going to ask for relief from because you created a bigger density in Article 5 if it passes. You know what I'm saying? And why it's justified. And I had registered to speak, but I guess I just got slipped. So I'm trying to sneak
I'm
it
sorry,
in.
I didn't have you on Article 6.
Mr. Moderator?
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. That's a good question. One of the principles of smart growth planning is to concentrate development in your downtown central business district. As you saw from Article 5, there are a series of design standards that try to control how the buildings look, where they're placed, how they're oriented. Those were part of the overlay district that we were proposing for Article 5. We added the additional density for that district because it's our central business district. We did not feel comfortable at this point in time to increase the density in the other commercial districts beyond 16 dwelling units per acre because it didn't have the same architectural design standard controls. And as I said, general planning principles dictate that you focus the development in the central business district, and the other business districts have less density and less density of development in the other commercial districts. So that was very deliberate why we did that.
All right. Further discussion on the motion? We got
Paul Lisi, District 3. So the intent to allow more units on an acre, what was the purpose behind that? Because all I hear when you go around town is that we don't want any more apartments in Norwood, we don't want any more apartments in Norwood, and I understand that. But now the planning board has an article before us to allow you to have more units than you're required. So I'm just curious to know why this came up.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes, please.
In order for a property owner, and I know you're a property owner and you own real estate in town and apartments, in order for a property owner to make a decision to tear down an old dilapidated building and reinvest, they need to get a return on their investment. Oftentimes these are income producing properties, and so oftentimes the property owners need to get loans, and those income producing properties stop generating income during the time frame that they're rebuilding. One of the reasons, as we said earlier, that we haven't seen any change in the downtown is that our bylaw is too restrictive, and it doesn't allow enough density for a property owner to take that risk to get a return on their investment. And they say that actions speak louder than words. Well, in this case, no action is speaking to us about why there hasn't been change. We could throw slides up of rundown properties in our commercial zoning districts that need to come down and be redeveloped, but the property owners, there's no incentive for them to do that. And I'm not comfortable pointing out properties that really need to be redeveloped. So we understand the economics of the situation, and we understand that at 11 units per acre, it's not worth it for a property owner to take that risk to redevelop because they won't get a return on their investment.
I understand. Just one follow-up. So who determined the 16 units per acre as opposed to the current 11? Why didn't we go to 22 units per acre?
This was a double-edged sword. We had to balance what we thought would work out to provide enough incentive for the property owners to take that risk and reinvest versus how much density would town meeting members and the town accept. And we felt after some discussion with the planning board and with Mr. Brovitz, our consultant, that 16 was a number that we would be comfortable with.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Moderator, Ed Ferris, District 8. So a question here. What can you actually build with 16 units on 1 acre? What do we end up with? That's question number one. And number two is I'm a little confused because you're talking about commercial property redevelopment, but then we seem to be talking about converting that to either residential property, or are we talking about converting it to mixed-use property? Because it's not clear here. And while granted we could get development by converting a lot of commercial property to residential property, we don't make as much money on it as we do with commercial property. So if you would, Mr. Moderator, to whoever can answer those two questions.
Mr. Haliotis?
Thank you. That's a good question. Right now, our zoning does allow for, in the commercial zoning districts, the central business, the highway business, the limited business, and the general business zone. It does allow for residential uses. It's not strictly commercial in those districts, but it only allows at a density of 11 units per acre. And so when you think of this, you think about floors of buildings, and so those are stacked up. And so at 11 units per acre, you can see what you could develop at 3 or 4 stories. 3 stories is what the height limitation is in most of those districts. So that's what could be built, either commercial or residential in those commercial districts.
Anything further, Ms. Ferris?
Actually, I'm not clear on the answer to question one. What could you actually build at 16 units?
You could build commercial development, you could build residential development, and you could build residential at that greater density. The bylaw allows for both types. You could build condominiums or apartments.
That's what I was going to say. We're talking about very tight townhouses or smaller apartments within that space, correct?
Yes. Earlier this evening, we gave an example showing Olivardi's building. That building has a restaurant on the first floor, and it has 14 apartments above. When we calculated the density of development on that site, it came out to 41 dwelling units per acre. And so we use that as an example. It's a well-designed, beautiful architecture building, and we point to that to say this is what our commercial districts could change to. But in order to achieve that change, we have to give the property owners and the developers more density in order for them to take that risk to reinvest in their properties to increase our tax base.
Okay. Mr. Moderator.
Yes, sir.
So, final question. Now that we are no longer under the requirements of 40B, if a property owner wants to do a development, what then is the process for approving that development? Would that go through town meeting? Would that only go to planning board?
Mr. Haliotis, if you know.
We do not recruit development. The free market system is what drives real estate development. We do not actively go out and seek developers to build on private property sites.
I'm sorry, but wouldn't we have a say in if a development is converting from strictly business use to mixed use or residential use?
We being the town meeting, or we being any of the planning boards in the town?
I'm sorry?
Your question was, would we have a say? And I'm just asking, who are you asking? You're saying, do we, town meeting, or are you asking, do we, some board?
Actually, both. Does
Okay.
town meeting have that, or does the board have it?
Mr. Aliotis, if you can answer that?
There's a process that's specified in the zoning bylaw that requires a special permit. In some cases, the Zoning Board of Appeals is the special permit granting authority, and in other cases, it's the planning board. Town meeting plays a vital role in that by approving these zoning regulations that are in place. And not only does it require a majority vote, it requires a 2/3 majority vote to make any changes to the zoning bylaw or the zoning map.
Thank you. Yes, Barb? Right,
Slater, District 4, move the question.
all right, question's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of moving the question, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. The motion is moved. This is a motion that requires a 2/3 vote. Let's start by a show of hands. All those in favor of Article 6, please say aye. And raise your hand. And all those opposed, please say nay. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 nays. I count far more than 16 yeas, and so the motion carries. Yes, Mr. Conley. Yes, Mr. Conley.
Kevin Connolly, District 7. Being it's beyond the bewitching hour of all town meeting members, I make a motion to adjourn until Monday, same bat time, same bat place.
Is that seconded? All those in favor, please say aye. What's that? I'm informed that the Bruins won in overtime.